All right, we're going to call this October 24th Select Committee on School Facilities meeting to order. Just take a quick few seconds here and then we'll go to roll call. I just want to take a few seconds for some opening remarks and then we'll do the remainder of all the actual stuff that we're going to do here. But I want to take a second here, first and foremost, to thank staff, our staff on LSO. They're probably sick and tired of hearing me seeing my name come up on their caller ID and knocking on their doors. Thankless job that you guys have. So I want to make sure publicly to thank you guys for everything that you guys have done over the past 6 weeks. Also would like to publicly thank Jerry. Jerry, I know that the staff situation with your area has been a tough one. And I know a lot of this has fallen on your shoulders. So I know that you have been very busy as well. But I want to say thank you for getting us all the information that we've requested. I know it wasn't easy and I know it was a task on you. So just want to say thank you for that. And then for the committee members who were able to make it, and I know we've got a few that are going to be joining us via Zoom, and I think Representative Harshman is already on. Thank you guys for being here. So we have a lot to go through today. We have a lot of people here. I've got the normal script that tells me to tell you guys to be adults. I don't want to have to go through that, but we're in a professional setting, so please address the chair when you're doing your comments. No discussions back and forth between committee members and the dais here. Just please direct everything through the chairman. Try to keep it as civilized as possible. And if we have a lot of public testimony on the same topic, I would just ask that you try to keep your comments pithy and to the point. And if somebody has already said what you're going to say, maybe don't say that again. And we appreciate you being here. But we do have a ton of information to get through today. So with that being said, I'll come off my soapbox and I'll ask staff for roll call, please.
Senator Beitman.
Excused. Yep,
Okay.
He will be here though.
Senator Hicks. Here. Senator McEwen.
Excused.
Senator Rothfuss.
Here.
Representative Harshman.
Here.
Representative Oakley.
She is excused, but will likely be in this afternoon.
Representative Olson.
Here.
Representative Storer.
Here.
Vice Chairman Landon.
Excused.
Chairman Brown.
Here.
You have a quorum.
And also take a second here real quick too to say happy anniversary to our vice chairman who is out gallivanting across the globe right now. I believe it was 35 years, if I remember correctly. So congratulations to him and his bride. So with that being said, we can get started. Even though we were a little late getting started here, we're actually only 2 minutes behind schedule. That's a first for this committee. So Jerry, we've got the proposed rules up in front of us. We've got Jerry and Chairman Tarter and also Chief Perkins. Thank you for joining us, Chief. And when you guys are ready, please just introduce yourself for the record, and the floor is yours. Committee, you do have a copy of the proposed rules distributed to you. It's the smaller of the two elephant clips that we've got here. So.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Jerry Vitson, Director of the State Construction Department. And we want to pull your microphone a little bit closer there and introduce yourself.
Jack Tarter, Chairman of the School Facilities Commission.
And Drew Perkins, Governor Gordon's Chief of Staff.
So, Mr. Chair, on page 1 regarding the rules, we have an overview. Like you said, we have a lot to do today, but I'm not going to read it word for word. But it does talk about the process itself. It talks about which rules were part of the emergency rules. We reached out to districts 3 different times, got input from 6 districts, and we've taken that input and we've met with the commission in their last meeting, also gathered their input, which is why you have a handout packet for this, because there was getting the strike through and what we call the clean and the dirty, plus their comments, plus our department comments. All that is together. Decision doesn't have to be made on that today by the select committee, but we do want to hear what you have to say, what your thoughts are based on what we stated. If you look in the timeline today on page 4, and we can come back to this in a moment, We are where we need to be right now with putting this before the Select Committee and LSO for comments. And then we meet with the commission next on November 2nd to take into any consideration of what we have stated and put before you now. Currently, we are still gathering input. It's open if anyone else wants to submit input. I hear there's another district that might give us some input. And that input stays open until November 2nd. Whether the commission extends emergencies or adopts, it still stays open during that 45-day public hearing comment period, which will go into the new year. And then we have a February 21 meeting with commission if we need to finalize at that point, if they weren't able to finalize or wanted to take other comment into consideration. Or that's when the time would run out on the second extension on the emergencies. So any questions about the timeline? And then I can go back to page 2 and just kind of do an overview summary for you all on what all the comments stated and the ones that we thought were the most germane and the ones that we feel we've addressed.
Committee, any questions on the timeline as it's proposed right now, or as it's presented, I guess, not proposed? Seeing none. Also, welcome Senator Beitman. Thanks for joining us, sir. All right, Jerry, looks like we're good. If you'll just take us through
Thank you.
the
So-
suggestion summary.
Thank you, sir. So on page 2, we do, because this is a big year, especially after 8 years not having an FCA, FCI, there were comments about that, and that we have acknowledged the comments about the FCA, FCI, but it wasn't directly related to the rules that were being altered right now. So we took that into consideration. We wanted to make notation that there were a number of districts who had comments about that, and we feel like we should not edit that out. We wanted that to be clear and upfront. There were comments in here that I found very helpful. I got here when the first commission rules were a year and a half in conversation and were being adopted. So it's a good learning curve for me too. One of the key ones that I think was brought up repeatedly is adding a definition for uniform adequacy standards, so that we weren't deciding what we thought was adequate or what you thought was adequate and what the district thought was adequate. So we put it into the definition and then included it in its chapter with its own section. And then another key one that I thought was important was, and I think we have a few of these districts here today, but just in general, when you're doing, and this latest FCA, FCI brought it to bear, but it was the same situation the last time it was done. We have schools that are far larger, that were built pre-1997 than what they needed to be now. And when we are calculating replacement value on what today's enrollment is for an oversized school, their score doesn't show up the way it should. And so we have some high schools that we've been talking about for quite a while. But I will tell you, 2 months ago, I did a tour of the old Cary Junior High. That's a junior high school that has 184,000 square feet. So if the district keeps that in their inventory and does something with it, that's a lot of excess square footage. And so if we were to calculate the FCA, FCI based on that square footage, the score wouldn't look proportionate. So what this allows is the opportunity, 1, 2, 3, fourth bullet down in the overview. This allows a district to come in through the department to the commission and say, for example, you are basing my score based on 325,000 square feet, but my enrollment says I should have 225,000 square feet. And that's a big deal when we start putting that calculation together. So that was brought forth by a few different districts, and we believe that to be a good equalizer, a good level the playing field, looking at the overall size of these very large high schools. Some of the other comments that were made was on page 3. When building a facility, third bullet down, facility is inadequate for delivering the required educational program. So the underscore, this is something that was not there at all. The red is the comments back from the districts and or commission or from ourselves. So in this underscore here, you can see that all that was missing. So the comments that came in from a couple different districts is, what does that look like? That's just a big old comment that says, making a claim that a building or facility is inadequate for delivering the required educational space. Can you give us something that we can grab on or build off of there in order to make our case? So a few different districts had very similar language such as this. And so we have put that in for review. We've talked to the commission about it. There was no comment in disagreement of that language. And we feel that this is helping a school district come in and make their case as to why they believe that their school is inadequate. The other comment that was made a couple different times in the emergency rules is, and when you read it in, when you read it in words, it does actually look that way, although it wasn't intended to be that way. It said that at the sole discretion of the department on a number of things. And the whole concept of why we're doing this is together. That didn't look good, it didn't read good, it didn't feel good. So we took all that out. So with that, Mr. Chair, that's an overview of the rules, and we stand for any questions.
Okay. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question regarding the kind of the new language, aggregate student performance data, specific known deficits with respect to the Commission's uniform adequacy standards, and basically adding that in, and appreciate the fact that that's being added in so that that can be raised to the Commission. But it's my understanding that that still would not be incorporated into the FCI or FCA score, because you're still going to have as your target achieving the original building performance design, as opposed to whatever we contemplate to be an adequate design at this point in time. And I understand that's the common approach to that, but it does then, when we're calculating it, fail to provide us really with a true vision of, well, what would it cost to bring this school up to what we contemplate as a modern adequacy standard. That said, I don't think that's incalculable, and it does seem like something that we should understand and that should be accessible by the districts. Is there a way for us to accommodate that through rule? I don't think we'll immediately have that data, but it's something that we should be thoughtful about, that if you're contemplating repairing a building versus replacing a building, and you're only basing that decision on repairing to an inadequate standard, then you're not really taking into consideration the full value proposition. Do you feel that this new language adequately accounts for that, or do you think we might need a little bit more there?
Mr. Chair, Senator Rothfuss, I think this is a good start, but I don't think the conversation ends there. If you look at page 5, we had other in there, comments that were made.
Yeah.
And I think this is getting to what you're talking about. You know, when you're looking at adequacy, and the comment was made that currently there's the belief that our floor and our ceiling is the adequacy. So therefore, if you fall outside that, you are in an enhancement realm. So enhancement aside from right now, I'm looking at, there's a suggestion here that we should be looking at the commission's design guidelines, which, just as it happens, we will start to review in February, March of this year. It's been 4 years. And looking at it, because it also ties to the value engineering. So those two are both coming up in a review, and then ultimately an RFP, RFQ here in the spring. But there's the suggestion that I think is more along the lines what you're saying, is that when you're looking at adequacy, if we're building to these design guidelines in the new, shouldn't that be something that we should be taking a look at? Square footage, dollar amount per square footage when we are determining an overall existing facility. So I think you're on the right track. I think that's what this is going. So I think we're heading in there with the first comment on the rules, and that this needs to be explored further here on where the ceiling and where the floor is.
Mr. Chairman, quick follow-up.
Sure, follow up.
And I realize, again, I appreciate that we're going down this path, but thinking down the path, it seems that an FCI score that reflected the cost to achieve a fully adequate building consistent with the state's guidelines as the numerator, and the cost to create a new build as the denominator, as the FCI score, probably is more appropriate, because that's based on compliance with what we consider to be constitutionally appropriate school facility as opposed to just whatever happens to be there today. How challenging would it be to be calculating to that? Because now instead of having, I mean, when you think about how it's actually carried out through the software and the evaluation right now, you really are looking for, these are the components that are in place. This is the cost to replace it. This is its quality. So you're not taking necessarily into consideration, but you lack air conditioning. What are your thoughts on the amount of work it would take to be building within the current software that type of an approach where you're taking into consideration whether something is or is not there and what the appropriate adequacy standard is?
Mr. Chair, Senator Rothfuss, it's a bit of a lift, but I don't think it's a heavy lift. I think before we talk about that, how are we bringing design guidelines in, looking at your adequacy, looking at your numerator, and what that looks like? I'd rather have that process done first, and seeing what that looks like, so we're not getting skewed data. We have done a lot of things this year, and some things differently. And I also think, per the legislature, we've cleaned up some things like that. Consolidated list. So before we head right back into a new numerator or denominator, I'd like to take a look at that and come back to the group and see what that looks like. But because we're starting to go from a state construction department and looking at education, and what is adequate for education. And so we might need some other thought partners in that area. Running the formulas on the square feet is one thing, but knowing why we're running them is another. Thank you.
Yes, Chief?
Mr. Chairman, if I can just pose this, I mean, I think one of the premises is that there's something wrong with the condition of the building that affects its adequacy. And I think the other side of that coin is that oftentimes the building will be perfectly adequate. The component systems may be fine. It just may not be you have the proper space allocated for whatever the educational program needs to be offered. And so that creates its own problem, because there's nothing wrong with the condition of the building. It's just not quite configured correctly, or there are other attributes that may be fine, that the condition may be just fine. But so it becomes hard to calculate that into the condition index, because the condition of the components in the building and structures are fine. It's just it's not meeting the particular need because the educational mission or the educational purposes have been changed.
It's a perfectly good pole barn.
It may not work for.
Any further questions from the committee as it relates to, Jerry, I guess before I go there, do you want to continue through the other and through the responses that were through there, or were you planning on just making the?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just a follow-up comment on even what Chief Perkins said. When we're looking at that FCI score in my past school districts, when I am trying to take an existing school and make it adequate for how we educate today, there is a big component in there that turns into a cost component. I'm looking at, it would be in the denominator. If we have to start moving all kinds of load-bearing walls around to get us the square feet that we need, at what point is that not making sense? So that's why I'd like us to do some more study on that, please. On the other comments that I thought were key that should be brought up is the floor and the ceiling conversation. And then we were told, no uncertain terms, a number of times as it turns over and relates to charter schools, that the department and the state have no business being involved in the district schools and how they operate them and what they do with them. So that comment was made a couple of different times in there as well. So with that, if you want to have a high level from Chairman Tarter on an overview on his feelings about what the commission thought and saw. And
That would be great.
have something-
Chairman Tarter, please.
Chairman Brown? I forget to turn these on, You get my age and you get a little shaky when you talk about. On the rules overall, I feel that we being commission, along with the help of the department as well as the Attorney General's office, have really put a good, solid foundation of rules together. Admittedly, anytime you have rules, there's going to be a need at some point in time to change those rules. And I think that's one thing the commission we have, and as well as the department now, we know that if we have an error, we're going to change it and make it right. And that's the reason my feeling is, and my hope is that generally everything will be accepted the way it is, so we can get the rules published and approved. But again, as long as I'm chairman, I can assure you that if there's a rule that's bad, we will advertise and correct it. And that's an absolute promise. There's no perfect system. There's you all in the legislature change laws as needed, and we'll do the same.
I think we do a fantastic job. We never have to fix anything in the legislature, so. All right, committee, any questions and/or we'll open it up for a little bit of comment here as well. I will say that since the committee has just had a chance to grab these and actually go through them, that we will probably have some information. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Okay, I guess I have, two questions here. First and foremost, on your proposed timeline, how likely do you feel that you will be able to adhere to what you guys have right now, as opposed to needing to go to an additional 120 days of emergency rules? What is your expectation with that, since you guys have hit certain amount of districts responding? But based off of what we also may have coming up today, I'm suspecting you guys, the people that are here today, are probably the ones that have responded as well. But what's your expectation there?
Mr. Chair, I don't want to be overconfident, because we have I think we've done a really good job in the last few months of working with districts, whether it's their projects, whether it's their scores, whether it's the rules. And I think that we've hit on and are moving forward with the key ones. I think districts know that, just like what Chairman Tarter said, that they're not going to get everything. But I think the ones that we've hit on, and there'll probably be some public comment, are key to them. If that is true, that we've hit on the key ones with them, the conversations with the commission have been receptive to these. And so I don't want to speak for the commission, but I don't see, unless something comes from the select, like, that's a good idea, we didn't think about that, or another district submits something that a district that hasn't submitted, I think we're on target to move forward on November 2nd with these rules.
I guess my secondary question kind of piggybacks off of that a little bit, but ultimately at the end of the day, we only had 6 districts that made full comment. And you can choose to look at that in 2 different ways. Number one, you can choose they saw it, they looked at it, they didn't see much wrong with it. The other way that I personally believe is probably the more adequate way to look at it is they probably don't have a staff person to sit there and dig through, 70 pages of rules that have changed and determine how that's going to impact them the way that some of the larger districts do. What kind of outreach have you guys done? I know you've done the call, but I know you guys also work with individual school districts on a daily basis that call up. Has there been any level of outreach to them individually to say, just want to make sure that you guys saw the rules, that, what are your guys' inputs? And the only reason I'm asking that is just because we only see 6 out of the 48. That's a very small sample size of what we've got coming out there. So what have you guys done at the department level? And when I say you guys, I really mean you. What kind of outreach has been done?
Mr. Chair, thank you. So a lot of the items that are on today's agenda have caused, if you're going to contact a district, multiple things discussed with them. And this has been one of them. So when I first got here, we were landing the rules. I did what's called the road show. I drove all the way around the state, 8 different districts, held town hall meetings. And in the end, we had 7 districts that submitted at that time. And that was a year and a half into the process, and now 6. So I think you're right. I think for the smaller districts, and the feedback that we got is we don't have somebody to sit on top of this. So when I have been calling around to the districts, and I got very fortunate, one of my project managers said, up in the Bighorns and everything, we have a consortium, about 10 or 12 of us that meet, and we happen to have a meeting tomorrow. Would you like to attend? And I said, absolutely. So we walked through overview of what some of the rules are. We walked through the components and what the changes are going on with there, the education, non-education. We walked through how in the timing, any questions they had on FCA, FCI, and in that, with the timing of it, the way it staggered the facility plan meeting so that we weren't able to incorporate some of this data in the facility plan. We discussed that and then talked about how we would have a follow-up reconciling what we saw during the FCA and I with our database and with them. So we actually covered all of that with these districts. And I was fortunate, I would say, in 5 cases, that the superintendent of the district be the one that I spoke to directly. So I feel like we've made an outreach. I understand where they're coming from. They say generally, we are not in the money on a capacity or a condition, so we just take our major maintenance and that's it. But I do think what you're saying is true. They do not have somebody who can study these for them.
And then I guess on top of that note, I will just say I do appreciate the significant amount of time that it took for the districts that did put in the notes and their comments. Really, really good comments, really good information there that I found enlightening in a few cases. So I do appreciate the districts that took the amount of time out that they did. I'm sure that also helped you guys reformulate the way that you guys put together the rules package. So
Mr. Chair, I should extend that thank you as well. I mean, the first time we got comments when I first got here, like, I don't like it. Well, what does that mean? Can you unpack that? And I think what maybe helped them is the FAQs, because then they can take exception to the FAQ. They can build off of the FAQ with their answer. But, the replies that we got were very calibrated this time around and very on purpose from 2 years ago.
okay. Committee, any further questions and or comments on the proposed rules? Or anybody up here in the hot seat? Seeing none. Okay. All right, gentlemen, thank you guys. We will go ahead and open this up for public comment, knowing that public comment is probably going to have some reiterations from what we see here is what was submitted. That's totally fine. I don't expect the public to go through and read everything that we were submitted and that the department was submitted. So please, if you're interested in making comment on the proposed rules, please feel free to come up here, take a seat, introduce yourself, first and last name, and who you represent.
Chairman Brown, members of the committee. First, I did want to comment. You hit it right you hit the nail on the head. I don't have the staff to read 70 pages. I do rely on some of the other districts that do. I agreed with a lot of it. I did talk to my project manager about it. Also talked to Jerry a little bit in many conversations that we had. The district was fine. We did have the one question about the section 14. And once that was clarified, we were good with it. I did want to take.
Can I get you to just introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry.
Please.
Dan Celeroli, Sweetwater County School District Facilities Director. I've been coming to these things for almost 20 years. So the only guy who's gotten old here is me. Senator Rothfuss looks as young as he did 20 years ago. So anyway, I did want to thank you for your comment. The difference between adequacy and guidelines. When I go into a building to do whatever on major maintenance projects, I don't bring the building up to adequate standards. I bring it up to the guidelines. A lot of times when you do a certain percentage of the building, you have to bring it up to state codes. So there is a huge difference. When these guys come around, and we have Bureau Veritas, and we've also hired an independent, the scoring is really different. The way they did the methodologies was different, but the results were the same. So what I'm getting at is the standards. When we're looking at these FCI scores, we have got to look at what it's going to take to bring these up to guidelines, because the standards just, like I said, the standards, brought up a real good point about a pole barn. T12s are adequate, But who has T12s in their buildings anymore? You change over to LEDs for numerous reasons. A lot of it is health reasons for people in the buildings. So, I mean, these things need to be considered moving forward, and hopefully, I was gonna say, hopefully things will change. Like I said, I've been doing this for 20 years, and in 20 years, I don't see the same faces. I see a few of the same faces, but we always have new people come in, and it's always kind of refreshing to talk to new folks, but sometimes frustrating because it seems like Groundhog Day. We're going back to where we were 20 years ago. And like I said, I've been here and I've seen every director come and go. I've been here since Bubba days. So hopefully we can move forward and change things. I know it's a big task to do, but I'm hopeful. Thank you.
Dan, thank you. Any questions for Dan? Thank you, Dan. Mr. Bartlett, and anybody else, if you're interested in testifying, if you wouldn't mind just coming up here and filling the seats, and what we can do is just go 1, 2, 3, and we can eliminate the amount of time that it takes to switch seats. If you're interested, please come up and fill the seats. Mr. Bartlett, please.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'm Dave Bartlett, representing Campbell County High School. I'm the younger version of Dan. I've only been coming here for about 18 years, so. Really my comments are quick and brief. I just wanted to thank the department and the commission for their efforts in embedding the public comments that the district put forth. In the past, sometimes I felt like we've offered but not been heard. And this time I do believe Chairman Tarter and Director Benson have done a great job of hearing and working toward kind of a collaborative process. One of the things I mentioned at the commission meeting when they were looking at this and they were talking about the floor and the ceiling, and similar to what Dan had said, adequate we do see as the floor, and the design guidelines again is what we see as what we should be moving toward, whether it's major maintenance, routine maintenance, just our efforts around the district. Really, when you've got a district that has multiple schools, you don't want to go beyond the design guidelines, because then you've set up a standard that you have to meet multiple schools across the district. And of course, we're trying to just have that equal playing field there and have comparable facilities. So I do appreciate those changes there. And then the other one is right sizing the scores. I'll give you an example, Campbell County High School. I heard this committee speak at the last meeting about trying to right size the state. Campbell County High School is a great example where it is 90,000 square feet over what we would build to today. So when you look at an FCI score, that does just impact where that score comes out. If we renovate and move forward, the district does have to consider what does it cost to maintain that additional 90,000 square feet over the life of the building, and that does have an impact on the general fund. So thank you.
Committee, any questions for Mr. Bartlett? Okay, thank you. Any other further public testimony on the proposed rules? Seeing nobody rush into the mic. I think everybody's still half asleep this morning. That's okay. All right, so we will close public testimony. On the committee directives, I'll just start out by saying, again, Director, committee just received these yesterday to really go through them. So I as I was rereading through everything else last night, that was not the top priority, making sure that I remembered everything that we had given to us earlier. So we will probably have some comments, just as you're aware, in committee. As you're going through, I would also recommend reaching out to your local school districts and determine whether or not they have any comments. But I will say I appreciate hearing from 2 different school districts at a minimum that they appreciate the work that has gone into these and being heard. One thing that I will say that I believe is a cautionary tale for everybody is, especially for the school districts out there that felt like they haven't been heard in the past, it's also very, very critical to make sure that we understand that compromise is the word of the day. We don't always get everything we want, and when everybody walks away from the table a little upset, that means we can all go to a compromise level. So I think it's very, very important that we recognize that just because we weren't heard or our changes weren't identified and changed in the rules package, just being heard and at least acknowledging that from the department side of things, and it sounds like that's occurring. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate the hard work on that. So committee, yes, Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm interested in the suggestion on page 5 of Director Vincent's packet that he referred to, the department suggestion at the bottom, because this floor ceiling conversation is a statutory requirement, is what is pretty clear. It's, it can't be fixed by rule based on the language that's in statute. There's a suggestion to tweak statute so that the target is effectively the commission's facility design standards and guidelines as opposed to adequacy standards. And I guess the question is, and I guess we'll find this out later, if we're going to meet again, which we may do, I think it would be handy to have perhaps this drafted at that point and to contemplate it. If we're not going to meet again, I don't really like drafting, sponsoring, and running legislation in the final meeting. That's never the best of ideas. But I guess more, maybe a little more discussion on whether this is a sufficient solution or whether there's more to it. I'd look to staff and Director Vincent. Is that going to fully achieve the needed interest?
Director, we'll open it up to you first, and I'll play brick wall here to staff since we just received this. My suspicion is that staff probably hasn't had a chance to look at it and really determine the whether or not the impact on that is going to be enough. But Director, if you wouldn't mind just going into that a little bit detail and kind of give us your thoughts on,
Sure.
on how you guys arrived at that.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. So, this is for LSO. We need to have LSO take a look at this thing and get back to us. So I think a lot of that rides on that. But we think that when you look at, statute 2115-119, that's the place that when you hear, Sweetwater get up here and say, gosh, directors come and go, but it'd be nice if we had something that can sustain. And we believe this would be the place where you would address that. But we're open to hear when LSO has an opportunity to review that, we're open for that suggestion.
Okay.
So, because I do think you're right.
I think that I appreciate that. And so what we'll do with this committee, as Senator Rothfuss mentioned, we may or may not, we will wait and see how the rest of the day unshakes itself here, but may have another meeting after this. And if we do, what we'll do is we'll come back and we'll offer that up as a directive for staff to look at this if we have that. If not, it seems like a very good personal bill that we can try to squeeze through if we needed to as well. So that'll work. Okay.
Mr. Chair, just one more comment on the rules. I thought when Mr. Bartlett was speaking, it is a lot of information for a small district to take into effect on the rules. So one of the things that we changed from 2021 is the executive summary that you saw here. Not only was that posted on the website, it was blasted to all districts. So like if you don't have a chance to read 71 pages, here's a 2-3 page overview on the highlights of it. So yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Jerry. All right. Committee, anything further on the rules? Seeing none, don't look now, but we are ahead of schedule by 45 minutes. So we are going to just continue working through here. That brings us up to charter schools. Tanya, I believe this is up to you. And committee, this will be 24 LSO 165 in your packet. And I will say, as we're waiting for Tanya to move up here and kind of doing the changeover here since we are ahead of schedule, I will say that I do appreciate, I've received numerous calls on this particular bill already. And I appreciate the due diligence from the school districts and some of the information that has been provided. So we will dive into this and just know that the school districts that I've heard from do appreciate it. And we will work through everything that we can at this point. Ms. Heitrick, floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman, Tanya Heitrick, Operations Administrator, Legislative Service Office. As you mentioned, 24 LSO 165 charter school leasing. This bill request was actually made at your first meeting. And at that meeting, the request was to eliminate the requirement that charter schools operate successfully for 3 years to receive financial assistance for their lease. That was operationalized through the repeal of Wyoming Statute 21-3-110A, Romanet 10, capital A, 3. And that can be found on page 3, line 7 in section 2. Recall at your last meeting, you, Mr. Chairman, had a couple of amendments that you requested to tighten up the language with regard to the determination about adequate and available square footage, both in contemplating that at the district level, requiring a district to provide that space to charter schools. And then secondly, giving the department and the School Facilities Commission some cover in enforcing that. And so I'll go ahead and move through the bill. Those second changes can be found in section 1, beginning on page 1, line 11. And the change to Wyoming Statute 21-3-304K. These are the charter school operating statutes. And substantively, the change can be found on page 2, line 5. And it's very simple, but I think it does the intended outcome, and it states, and the school district shall make available the space to the charter school. And then the second amendment that we discussed at the last meeting was amending 21-15-123. This is the statutory section that governs the duties of the state construction department. And you'll note the substantive change on page 3, lines 3 through 4. This requires that in the event that the department makes that determination with regard to available and adequate square footage, it's required to be in the school facility district plans that are required under 21-15-116. Section 3, found on page 3, lines 9 through 12, provides that this act is effective immediately. And I would note that the existing statutes for charter school leases already had a provision with regard to adequacy determination. And so I think it's important to note what the existing statutory structure is and recognizing it's broader than what's actually incorporated in this bill. And with that, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my comments on this bill draft, subject to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Heitrick. Committee, any questions for Ms. Heitrick on the bill draft as it's proposed? I think she did a pretty good job explaining why we are re-seeing this. There was some substantive comments that I had made and brought forward, so just want to make sure everybody remembers what we were talking about up in Casper. But Senator Office?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Heitrick, on the final point, the additional language on page 3, I'm trying to imagine how that plays out with regard to a school district's facility plans and what that timeline is going to be. So this is a directive to the state construction department, and they shall review requests submitted by the charter schools. But I guess I'm curious what it would look like, what would be included in the school district facility plans that are required by statute. Would that be an outline of adequate and available space that would have to be there, or how would this play out in reality?
Ms. Heitrick?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Mr. Chairman. Senator Rothfuss. Practically, how this determination would be made is, I think the state construction department, they can speak to this, but they would make that initial determination as incorporated in statute. And then it would be incorporated within the long-range school district facility plan, which generally takes place early in the year. I think they concluded that effort in early April this year. Of course, Director Vincent can tell you that specifically, but that would also give the district an opportunity to provide feedback on this particular determination. That would be their mechanism to kind of come before the commission and say, this doesn't work for us, we're going to use this space for a different purpose. That's the piece where it would require a collaborative effort between the district, the state construction department, and the commission. And of course, those decisions are final agency actions.
Senator Office, follow-up?
Follow-up. So then in a circumstance where the director reviews a school district and says, all right, there in our view appears to be adequate and available space at this building that would be suitable for a charter school, then during the school district facility plan submission process where they're working to submit that to the director. That conversation would be had, and that then, whatever the final outcome of that discussion would be included in the school district's facility plan for that year. So it would provide an opportunity to figure that out, come to agreement, and that would be entered into the school facility plan one way or the other. So that becomes a document that effectively acts as the definitive document for the decision. Is that accurate?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, exactly. The long-term facility planning is sort of the master plan for each school district, and it contemplates a very collaborative process between the state construction department and the school district before it comes before the commission. And that review includes a space-by-space review, not just a building-by-building, but a space-by-space review. And so that would be the opportunity to come forward with a comprehensive plan, sort of alerting all parties to where that space sits and how it's going to work in the district. I mean, I think one example as a practical application is looking at the Laramie County School District number 1 situation and the charter school request here. That could have been dealt with through the long-range facility planning process. And arguably, they already had that authority given the notion that the opening phrase says space by space. But I think this specifically articulates those determinations must be included in the facility planning process.
Understood. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, I would say just with any bill, there are a myriad of different ways we could have drafted this. This is just the way I chose to draft it.
Thank you, Tony.
Senator Hicks,
Yeah.
good morning.
Mr. Chairman, Tanya, just a question again, kind of same vein as the application of how this would apply. Because once there's a determination by SBC that there's adequate space, isn't that space already in the facility plan for the school district? And so what changes now that if you have a facility plan in place, which you're supposed to have, according to the statute 2115-116, and now we're just changing the use from the district to a charter school, how is this gonna, shouldn't there already be a facility plan in place for this building
Ms. Heitrick?
or facilities?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks, great question. Yes, that is my interpretation of the existing statutes. I think this just tightens it up and is a sort of obvious directive with regard to this. But to your point, I agree the statutes already require a space-by-space allocation in the facility planning. It also requires every school district to fix the site for every school, including charter schools. But this definitively answers the question. And I would offer, we did have correspondence from the Wyoming Attorney General's office on this issue. And that is the reason why these particular changes were made. They disagreed with our statutory interpretation.
Thank you.
Any further questions, committee? Okay, Tanya, I do have one, and this is me just staying at the Holiday Inn last night and not being an attorney. As I read section K, and it says, and the school district shall make available space which is deemed available and adequate by the state. A lot of people, when they read this, they read just the red portion that we're adding in there, right? And so that becomes the scary part of the statute. But it says deemed available and adequate by the state construction department within the applicable district for the operation of the charter school. My thought on that is, does that then coincide with the same discussion that I believe both of these gentlemen up here have questioned on? When they say they deem it adequate and available, and the school district shall make that available, does that go in line with the facility plan that we add into the statute? And the only reason I'm asking that is because then I'm sitting here thinking maybe we can clean up and add just a few more words to 213304K that would say in consultation with the school district underneath the process for developing their long-range facility plan. So that would give the cushion that the districts understand, hey, look, the state's not coming in and just telling you have to give this up because they see it in their AIM system, that there's still that dialogue that has to happen. I'm kind of curious your thoughts on that.
Mr. Chairman, I think, I'm open to suggestions to improve the bill draft if that would, further tighten down the relationship between the two. I mean, one thing about it is you sort of have to read all of these statutes in concert together and kind of figure out practically how they make sense to implement. And so in my mind, I think it's clear, but I thought it was clear previously and it wasn't. So
Sure.
certainly if you have suggested language, we can gin up an amendment on that line.
Okay. Any further questions, committee? All right. Thank you, Tanya. Appreciate that. Let's see here. We'll go into, let's go ahead and just do a public comment on this. We'll just go to, well, Jerry, yeah, let's go ahead and have you come up first. I was trying to decide, we don't have to go necessarily into the Mercer portion of this, but I am kind of curious your thoughts on the bill as it's proposed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I don't write bills, and I would agree with Tanya. I don't think any one bill covers everything. But let me give you some of the input that we received this year. I did meet with the bringer of the bill immediately after session, and they said, keep track of what some of the conversations are and some of the issues and see if we need to do some cleanup language in the fall. And so I can just share those with you. And if you feel that needs to come into the bill somehow, then we can do that. So first of all, when we look at deem it adequate and available, some of the feedback is if we go and look and the school is mothballed, we say, well, it must be available. And some of the district's input has been, it's available today, but we plan on using it the year after next when we do a full renovation of this school, and it's just safer to move the kids out and cheaper and faster to do that. So it's available today, but it's not available. Why would they move in for a year and then move back out again, right? So there's a conversation about what available means. And then even if we tie it to the facility plan, and maybe this was just an anomaly, the facility plan deemed a school available and mothballed, but within a month said we've changed our direction here and we're going to be putting people into it. So are we going to lock them into that facility plan? Which I don't, as a former school district person, you need the ability with your trustees and your superintendent to look at how you educate kids. And so we're saying, nope, facility plan says it's available. So, and I don't know how many of those might actually, come up to where they've changed since available. The other thing is, hearing, Senator Rothfuss talk about the document being sort of a living document, a definitive document. Maybe this matters, maybe this doesn't, and we can change the format and how we do and our outline for a facility plan. Right now, there's no rule, no law that I'm aware of that makes the district sign their facility plan, acknowledging it. We have 12 that are not signed right now, and maybe some of them feel I disagree. That's why I'm not signing it. But we still should have an area for you to explain why you disagree. And if this is supposed to be a definitive document that we go forward with, it's currently an unsigned document. And I don't know if that helps. I don't know if that tightens things up, if that was imposed on it or not. I don't know. But right now, it is not required that the district sign the plan. And we can even have an acknowledgement area if I agree with my priorities, I agree with the major maintenance, I disagree with the charter. At least I should have a space in which to do that. And if so, then I think Tanya is correct. I think it does tie itself, to the facility plan. We'll just pause with that.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think one of the challenges we have is up until the state authorized charter schools, there wasn't really a need to have any type of definitive document because it was the district working internally for the district's interests based on whatever happened today. If a school floods out, they're going to look around and they're going to change their school facility plan tomorrow based on a situation like that. And that's good. That's a feature of the system. The challenge that we have at this point in time is that we're effectively designating a school within a district that the district is not going to have direct authority over, but it is available. It doesn't seem like either solution that we've talked about honestly appropriately works for it. And I don't know what the right answer is, but we have competing interests here. We don't want to break the feature of the current system, but we do, through statute, need the capacity to say, all right, there's suitable and available space in district that should go to a charter school instead of sitting in mothball or instead of becoming an admin building or whatever the case may be. I don't know that signing a document gets us there. Is there any other way that comes to mind on how we can achieve this interest? And I think including it under regular circumstances, including it in the school district facility plans is appropriate, but I guess I would worry if they then had to sign off on the bottom and that was the true facility plan for the next year. It fixes the charter school problem while breaking the rest of the district. What are your thoughts?
Mr. Chair and Senator Rothfuss, just a suggestion, if we're going to call it like a living document or a formal document, typically they might be signed. Another aspect might be, well, is there a time frame that the district deems that the school is not available? And that goes right back to the control issue of how they use their schools and what they do with them. So I don't have an answer for it. It's just been brought up repeatedly that you might say it's available, like what Representative Brown said, because of your AIM database says it's available, but we think otherwise. And then when we go to that point in time, which is the facility plan, and say, but you said it was, they still have the ability to say, well, that was then and this is now. So what I see extending from the original available and adequate is us now fully engaging in both parties all the way down to the doors are opened and someone is in or not, aside from an MOU that the charter has to work with the district on. And I just see us refereeing two entities that are adversarial by nature. And hopefully, the good news is I don't think we're going to have 10, 15 of these a year where it's going to be a push on staff. But when we do have them, I think every one of them is going to be a push, because it's going to start with what is actually available and what isn't. And then we're going to get in, we just had a conversation about rules and what districts think are adequate, right? How's that going to come in and start to apply in a charter? So it sounded fairly simple when I looked at the bill this winter, available and adequate. And but the districts are unpacking that, and the charters are meeting with us as well, and then talking about what they believe available and adequate means to them. And I don't have an answer, sir. I'm just bringing that up as a point.
Yes, Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, as this conversation goes on, it just opens up more questions and more questions. So I'm curious as the process. And so we looked at the 21.3.304, and it says the district shall make space. After the SBC makes a determination. So does the charter school then ask the SBC to go in there and make a determination that there's adequate space within the school district? And so where is that spelled out as to who does the charter school first approach? That's my first question. Is it the district or is it the SBC to make a determination?
I don't know if I want to do this, Senator Rothfuss.
Yeah. Well, to address that question, I think they would go to the school district to begin with. But at the end of the day, the legislation that we put forward last year makes it clear that they can now go to the commission and have a determination. And that then is the impetus for this, trying to clean up some of what we did in the last session to provide more bright lines where we're still struggling to identify those bright lines.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, and that's implicit, but it's not explicit. It's implied that you should go to the district first, but it doesn't necessarily say that. So I'm just wondering if we need to put some language in there that, it's a sequence of things the way, and the reason is I think it could create right off the bat some potential friction between the two entities if a charter school just went to SBC and asked a determination without going to the school board. So maybe we should clarify that. So that's a suggestion, Mr. Chairman. But then the other thing I wanted to get to is the second part of that paragraph, where it says all other costs of improvements, modification, operation, maintenance of school district facilities used by the charter school shall be negotiated between the charter school, the district board, and may be negotiated as an agreement separate from the charter. So now we're talking about the operation and maintenance of the facilities. What happens if they can't come to an agreement? Can the charter school then not occupy the building because they don't have or the facility? What happens if you have a charter school, a school board that won't sign an agreement based on negotiation for the operation? Can the charter school then occupy the facility or not?
Tanya, you just gave me the question to look there, but you also had your hand up for the first question. So if you want to bat at the second question or the first one, just let me know which one you're going for here.
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator, in response to the first question, applicants are required to include facility plans within their application, whether it's district authorized or whether it's an independent authorizing board, and that's 21-3308C. So that's sort of the first place that you would have an opportunity to see, all right, what is the plan for this charter school? And, where do they anticipate being located? Is it a leased facility? Is it in an old school? Those types of things. And then after that, it would sort of be on the obligation of this charter school. And I think to Chairman Brown's point, it's an easier negotiation if it's a charter school approved by the district as opposed to an independent authorizing board. But the operating statutes are not different for those entities. The requirements are the same, whether the charter school is approved by the district or approved by the independent hearing examiner or independent authorizing board, sorry. And in response to your second question, that's a more nuanced analysis and one I don't have the answer to sitting here today. Some of these details are still being worked out. I know from conversations with the Department of Education, this is a newly enacted statute, and I think as Director Vincent pointed out, we don't always get it perfectly correct the first time, so.
Okay, I'm going to caution everybody from telling us that the legislature doesn't get it right on the first time. We all know better. I would also say that was kind of the impetus behind the charter school bill that we approved last year, was in an effort to guide the process through the original process, was to get you to go through the charter application process through the originating school district. If that fails, if something can't happen, then there's the alternative, which is to go through the state authorizing board. That state authorizing board now has convoluted things ever so slightly, but I'd say at the end of the day, I think, if we go back to last meeting, we had this very in-depth discussion, and staff provided us a memo on this, that basically says the school district owns the building, but we manage them. And if the state ultimately decides, if the department decides that it's in the best interest of whatsoever needs to be the case, they have the statutory authority to do so. So I think one of the things that is imperative in this process, regardless of where we're at, is the understanding that it's a lot easier to work together when instead of working against each other on a regular basis. And what we've got right now is growing pains. And these growing pains are going to continue to hamper us until we get there. I believe this bill gets us to where we're trying to go to, but I also think maybe fluffing up the language to calm some of the concerns that are out there in consultation with the school district through the facility plan. Tanya, I was going to ask you on that as well, that you were busy sifting through the green books there on the long-range facility plans. Do you have any more information on that?
Mr. Chairman, I do. And it is, while it is a collaborative process, to your point, it is the state construction and the commission's ultimate authority over those facility plans. And that can be found in 2115 116D, which requires that once every 2 years, the commission review and approve each plan developed by the district. So while you can ask for the district's cooperation, you can ask for them to sign it, the ultimate authority statutorily resides with the commission and the approval of those plans, even so far as directing the expenditure of major maintenance expenditures. And the most extreme example would be consolidation of school districts. And in the event that a school district is aggrieved by that, there's a provision that they can challenge that through the Wyoming Administrative Procedures Act.
That's kind of what I was thinking, was that there was some level of authority given to, that we've provided the department through the process of all the school buildings. And I think this just reiterates the point that working together is a far better solution than strong arming one way or the other. So, Director, do you have something else?
Just two other comments that have been brought up by school districts. Sorry to
Sure,
muddy
please.
the water, but this is, I think, the place. You would think the conversations we've had to date are just about a closed school. And yet we have this kind of a conversation on a mothballed or closed school, a vacant school. A lot of districts have come to us and talked about what available means to them if it is shared, if they can join with the charter, and what they think available means to them. For example, if we see a facility that can hold 500 students and the district has 300 and the charter has 100, the math says that it is available. And then we step out of our lane, turn it over to the district and the charter for an MOU that may never happen. Because one of the available things is we just have one cafeteria or one gym, and we have X amount of PE hours that have to happen every day, and how we do what we do, and it is not available, right? So we're going to that, what's available. That isn't just strictly running off our AIM database. So they have brought that up. And then the other one is it is available. It's an elementary school. It's 40,000 square feet. But the 100 kids in the charter generate 12,000 square feet. And I can't block the rest of that school off. I can't cut back on the water and the power and the sewer. And is that fair to me that I have to spend a full 35, 40,000 square feet of major maintenance dollars on that facility for the charter when their enrollment says that they should qualify for 12 or 15,000? And then I've also had another charter say, if that happens, we're stuck in 12,000 over here, and we're happy for our fellow charter if that worked out, but that's not even adequate and equitable for where we are right now. So I do think, no one bill is going to solve this. I can tell you that this year, in addition to everything else that our department's been taking on, just because the way it landed, the charters and everyone has admitted it's been kind of ready, fire, aim by the time you came out of session, and charters had to get ready by July, and do I have a building or not? And so in terms of the reporting, how it should go, it should be collaborative, but we've had charters come to us first. Did you talk to WDE to see if the paperwork, and if you're even, because you're a brand new one, did you even talk to the district yet? Oh, we're sure that we'll already be turned down. And so what does that front end look like? Do you go to the district first because of district, or do you come to us? Because if we say there's no room, then there's no need going and filling out of your WDE charter in order to go to the district to see if they want to engage you in an MOU or give you a key or not. So what does the front end of it look like? And we're hearing that from both sides. And we don't have an answer for that. We just want to share that out.
And Jerry, I've had the exact same conversations with multiple school districts on the exact same solution. So you're not the only one hearing that, but okay. Well, let's go ahead and open up to public comment here. Public comment on 24 LSO 165. Let's see here. Charter school leasing is the catch title. Whoa. You okay, Jerry? Good morning, Mr. Follett, Mr. Brown, Dr. Brown. Mr. Farmer, please introduce yourselves and the floor.
Good morning, Chairman Brown, members of the committee, Matt Follett, Chief Financial Officer, Natrona County School District. I did not know I was going to be joined with these two guys this morning, so thank you for being up here. I appreciate the support. A lot of good conversation this morning, right? So the word of the day is compromise. So I'm not going to come up here and say, just throw this whole bill out. We're one of the 2 districts that are working through those growing pains of the state authorized charter schools, and it is far more reaching than just school facilities, as we all know. What I did want to do, I talked to the committee in Casper about how we're right-sizing our footprint in the district. We do have some excess square footage, and we are going down that path. What that's going to do then is leave us with 1 elementary school for swing space. And I just wanted to provide some context of the importance of swing space to like a district like ours. I have 2 anecdotal examples. First one is going to be back in May 2016 to June 2017. If you remember, Midwest Schools was shut down for about a year because of a leaky gas or oil well. So we bus those students into our which will be our 1 remaining swing space, and that's Westwood Elementary. Secondly, before that, from 2012 to 2014, state capital construction dollars came to renovate Southridge Elementary. So for close to 2 years, those students at Southridge Elementary went over to Westwood Elementary to receive instruction. Very convenient because we had the swing space. Very good points made this morning about it's tough from 250 miles away to go in the AIM database and say, there's a mothballed school in Casper. Let's just we can put one of our state authorized charter schools into that. It's not quite that easy. And I'm not going to reiterate what the committee had great discussion on what the definition of available and adequate is. We would appreciate the flexibility through the school facilities process if we could maybe define what available is, because we all know how this is going to work. The moratorium for state authorized charter school comes off in 27, in a few years. That's going to be here before we know it. Knowing our luck, we're going to get another state authorized charter school in Casper. It's going to look like Westwood Elementary has capacity to go in there. And then school facilities is going to call us up and say, we're going to do a major renovation, school capital construction dollars of one of our other elementaries. And now we have a charter school in our swing space. So what do we do with 250 to 300 students? Were we bringing modulars in for 2 years, trying to find a space in town to put those modulars? So for a district our size, the swing space is important to us. We would like to see some flexibility in our school facilities plan to kind of address, is it responsible, available excess capacity or something along those lines? I said, today is, the word of the day is compromise. So we're trying to kind of work through this. Wherever we could have for some flexibility to retain some type of responsible mothballed building, knowing that state construction dollars could come back into the district, do a large renovation for one of our elementaries, and that would help us move those students in the swing space and provide more of a seamless instructional experience for those students. So I think I also didn't stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night, left all my notes in Casper, so I had to, on the way down here, to look at this. But I think that is going to be large picture, what the committee has already discussed this morning. Great conversation. I just want to provide some context on how, and you guys hit the nail on the head, in the AIM database, it might look like it's available, but for us, we've had to use this swing space almost 2 times in the past decade. And we anticipate it hopefully happening more as we move on and hopefully get more schools renovated. So I stand by for questions. Thank you for your time.
Committee, any questions for Mr. Flett? No questions. Mr. Flett, just from me, I really liked the term that you used. I actually wrote it down, responsible excess square footage. That seems like an oxymoron at some point, right? That it seems redundant that we would have responsible excess square footage, but I think in a situation where and especially in a city like Casper where we see boom and busts, right? That only makes sense. And I applaud the district for going through and right-sizing the area where you guys are at. I also recognize the benefits of having the swing space. My concern, and I think I expressed this to you either earlier this week or last week, the days kind of run together, but the idea of a small school district that doesn't have swing space, what happens to them, right? And so we're in this position of, it's nice to be a big school district because you have the boom and the busts and you have that availability of going into this, but these smaller school districts that may have a a wall that falls down or a tornado that goes through or the school burns down, we have to find something along those lines as well. So my question to you directly is the thought process of adding some language in here to soften the blow of the language that we have that says, shall make available, but in consultation with the school district underneath the appropriate statute. Would that assist with the process? And the reason I'm asking this in a direct way is because if I say in consultation with, we've already discussed, and we've already heard it from the Green Books. We at the state level have the ultimate authority to say, no, we're done messing with you. We're just going to do it. Nobody wants to do that. But does that consultative process assist you in realizing that, hey, look, if you have another charter school that comes in 27, that there's going to be a consultative approach with this between this charter school that maybe did not come through your guys' school district and the state, and you guys can work together? Or are we just going to be in an impasse when a new charter school comes through the state authorizing board, no matter what?
Great question, Mr. Chair. The easy question is, or the easy answer is going to be, these are state authorized charter schools. State should deal with them, right? And this is how the state is dealing with them. So your question, yes, I think having the flexibility would help us out. And as Tanya noted, these charter school statutes are broad. They're complex. I don't know if this compromise reaches into administrative rule at the school construction department side of things, like give them the latitude to provide us that flexibility. I think some definitional change to provide that would definitely be welcomed. And I do not have any language for you today on that.
I understand. Senator Hicks?
Yeah, Mr. Fleck, on your testimony, you talked about the need for flexibility and swing space and stuff. And, what happens if we get a 300 student increase and stuff? But so in your experience, is when we go through these capacity studies, I believe every 3 or 4 years for every school district, those apparently aren't adequate for you to plan to determine what your potential future swing space is going to need. Am I correct in that?
Through the chair, Senator Hicks, great question. I have not been through one of those yet in intimate detail. So that would have to defer back to our buildings and grounds folks and our facilities folks within the district, and that's something I might have to follow up with you on.
All right.
Any further questions, committee, for Mr. Follett? Okay. Dr. Brown, Mr. Farmer, whichever one of you two would like to take the reins first. All right, Mr. Farmer.
Mr. Chairman, Brian Farmer with Wyoming School Boards Association. Mr. Chairman, have concerns, as you've noted, with page 2, line 5 of the proposed statute here. The inclusion of the language in the sentence really says that it is at the sole determination of the state. And then the school district has to make facilities available when so determined by the state. And Mr. Chairman, I thought at your last meeting you said that the legal memos you looked at said, hey, the school district owns these buildings. And so if that is true, and then the state comes in and says, hey, you're going to do this with your buildings, Mr. Chairman, that sounds like a taking to me. That sounds like the state is taking the property of the district. So much better process is a collaborative process. It is a process where the district and the charter can come to agreements on use of space. Not to repeat all of your discussions of today, but that is absolutely the determination of what is available in adequate space. Mr. Chairman, I think as we think about that, finding that opportunity for collaboration, that opportunity for both sides to weigh in, I think Mr. Vincent brought up other concerns that we've heard from districts that are important to think about. And that co-location issue was one that some of our members have a concern about, is in the practical operation of a school. It's really important to have school personnel involved in this decision. So can you share gym space? Can you share cafeteria space? Can you share playground space? All of those things, the answers are maybe. There's not yeses and there's not nos. But I think the realities of what could happen are the places that concern us. So absolute statements like this one that then put it to one entity making the determination instead of a collaborative process are the ones that have us concerned. And Mr. Chairman, Dr. Brown and I really are speaking with you in tandem. So if okay, I would appreciate his opportunity to comment, and then either or both of us happy to answer questions. But at your pleasure, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly, thank you. Dr. Brown?
Mr. Chairman, Boyd Brown, Wyoming School Boards Association, having the dubious honor of being the superintendent of the largest and the smallest school district in the state at one point in my life, thought I would bring just a few things to talk about there. I think one of the things that I don't think has been brought up is making sure that that space is adequate when you bring it back up, whether it's a mothballed building or it's a building that you're not using, or it's part of your building that's shut off and you're going to collaborate with. How does that work? Is that going to be major maintenance from the district to get that back up to an adequate place to have students? So I think that's something to think about as you look forward through this too. And I would like to address a little bit of where Senator Hicks was with emergency space at different times in different districts looks different. I remember a water main breaking in Campbell County, and we did not have any swing space. So we wound up with one of our elementary schools going about a week and a half longer than the rest of our schools because we had to have the number of days to do that. It would have been very nice to have some swing space at that time to be able to move those kids into. So sometimes you have those emergencies. We did have a tornado go through Wright. We wound up with some of the same things in that. I could only imagine working through some of that in a really small district where all your students are in one building. Some of the larger building or districts currently do have some swing space. I know that Laramie 1 and Casper both have some swing space. And it's very nice to be able to have that, to be able to do some things whenever you have an emergency. I remember when we had some hail damage out at, oh gosh, now I can't even think of the subdivision out. And we brought those kids into town while we fixed the roof and different things like that. So I think you never know when you're going to need it. You never know what's going to happen. But I think just thinking through all of that and how that will work is something that would be responsible at this point. And again, I understand where the charter schools are at with wanting to try to use space. And I think looking at it through their lens, it probably looks like you do have that space available at that time. But knowing that you may need it to be responsible to an issue that comes up, I think is important for the district to continue to have that look. And I do believe that if they work together, collaboration is probably the best thing that you can have. If you look at the charter school that's up and going in Chugwater, I don't believe that there was a lot of collaboration to start out with. I do believe that that collaboration is working now. I know that the district, or I don't know, I said I should believe that the district is working with them to even leave some of their furnishings and different things there to help out with all of that. But again, that's a totally different situation because they have shut that school down in the district, and those students that are not going to the charter school are being bused to Wheatland at this point. So I guess there's just a myriad of things that you need to think through. I don't really have a whole lot of answers other than thinking that it should be a collaborative effort. And then maybe it goes through an administrative hearings effort at the end of that. So with that, I'll quit talking and answer any questions you might have.
Committee? Yes, Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, so Boyd or Brian, either one of you want to field this. So I deal a lot with collaborative processes, and there's a perception out there that means consensus. And oftentimes, even in a collaborative process, you never get to consensus or get to an agreement. It just means you continue to talk. So at some point in time, there's got to be some finality associated with the determination of available and adequate. And you maybe have touched on it, but at the end of the day, it seems like the person that's paying the bills, which is the state of Wyoming, ought to have a significant role in that. Should it be the SBC makes that determination as it currently is under the bill? Or is it should be another process when collaborative processes never reach a finality or a final decision? There's got to be some point where the decision has to be made, and who should make that decision? Want to take a stab at that, Brian?
Mr. Farmer?
Mr. Chairman, I do wish I had an answer for that to say who makes the decision. I think the only answer I can offer is that in either outcome, a decision ought to be able to have review. So in making that decision, there certainly needs to be a respect for the owner of a facility, for the state determination of a potential availability of that facility, the public interest of the school, charter school. So I think all of those need to be taken into account. At the end of the day, you would want to have somebody who is neutral in the process, somebody who is fair and can make a determination. I suppose sometimes we lean toward arbitration, mediation, somebody that is mutually selected. If the state already has resources, determinations made by Office of Administrative Hearings are possible routes for that determination. But again, at the end of the day, I think once you're done with your administrative remedy, there's certainly the legal remedy, and that's the least desirable, because when you have the opportunity to work together, you have the opportunity for mutually beneficial outcomes. When you have the opportunity of an adversarial process, you have a winner and a loser. So creating something that has neutrality, yet informed, whether that looks like mediation, whether that looks like Office of Administrative Hearing, that might be a fair option for somebody to make a decision to push it forward.
Tanya, do you have something?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we did give this consideration, and so that is why we looped in the district facility planning in 2115-123. Those two provisions work together. You can't read one provision in isolation without the other. Senator Rothfuss's comment about adding perhaps a line at the end of page 2, line 8, that perhaps mirrors the language on lines 3 through 5 on page 3 is a great suggestion. I think that sort of gets at this issue. And I would point out, sort of in response to Senator Hicks's comment, if you take a look at 2115-116F, it requires, one, that the commission adopt policies, and that the commission and the department consult with the affected school districts and provide the districts the opportunity to informally review the plans, remedies, and projects with the department or commission before the districts pursue an administrative review subject under subsection E of this section, which is the section I mentioned previously. This is a process school districts are familiar with. It's been in place for years. Used to be called the 5-year plan. Now it's called the long-term plan.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Committee, any further questions for Dr. Brown? We'll just say the School Board Association. How about that? Brian, did you have something else to add? You good? Okay. All right. Thank you, guys. Mr. Knapp. Good morning.
Mr. Chairman, Andy Knapp, Laramie County School District 1. I'm going to respect your request not to repeat what everyone else has said here, but in reference to our long-range plan, we have a substantial swing space in Laramie County 1 that falls into that long-range plan and is documented pretty well in there that we've had. Part of the agreement when we built New Cary was to be able to keep that swing space as we rebuilt and replaced different schools in the district. We've used it. I believe New Cary finished in 2019 maybe. And and we've used it 4 times. And on top of that, usually I did like your comment there about responsible swing space. We were able to use it for one of our schools that was torn apart in a severe weather incident. So we were able to put that elementary school in there until we could get the other school rebuilt. We've used it for 3 other schools, and in our long-range plan have the intention of using it for several more, along with it being an adequate location to put one of our final elementary schools as we finish, either 5, 6, or a replacement of another smaller elementary that we have down the road. So I just think it's very important that the district has some say in that, and that long-range plan reflects what our intended use is without altering it.
Thank you, Andy. Any, yes, Senator Hicks?
Yeah, Andy, on your long-range plan, it includes the swing space facility. Does that facility have a facility plan for it? And has that facility plan been signed?
It's in our long-range plan, and every year we submit it, we sign it.
All right, thank you.
Committee, any further questions for Mr. Knapp? Okay, thank you, Andy. Appreciate you being here. Good morning, Ms. Klein.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Carrie Klein, and I'm with the Wyoming Public Charter School Association. Thank you for allowing me a few minutes to comment. I appear to have the whole table to myself at this point. So first of all, I just want to say that we do continue to support repealing the requirement and to wait for 3 years. And we thank you for your work on ensuring that public charter school students are treated equitably. Specifically regarding the available and adequate language, we support language that makes the process of determining adequate and available buildings more transparent for both the district and charter schools. We do agree that more dialogue is beneficial, and a way that both the charter schools and the districts have clear expectations regarding existing buildings is very important. As part of a public school system, no charter school wants to force a building to be made available at the expense of other students in that district. They do, however, want to be part of a transparent process where expectations are clear, that a dialogue has to at least occur regarding these facilities. As we've seen with the discussions today, this is a challenging issue. It's challenging for public charter school facilities to fit into district facility models. By model, I don't mean buildings, but within the requirements that we lay out as a state for districts. I've been in discussion with some colleagues from other states about this issue of funding for facilities for charter schools, and there are multiple ways that different states successfully are funding for facilities. And at the heart of each of one of those is the ability for a charter school to remain autonomous. A more in-depth look at the menu of options that you could consider that could benefit all the stakeholders in this process, I think is really important to have. I agree that probably will not happen today. I think this is a larger issue that needs a really in-depth look moving forward as we look at the direction that the state is moving with state authorized schools and district authorized schools that have to work in tandem. So I would ask that, as we continue these discussions, that you continue to look for ways to do this in a way that charter schools can remain autonomous and still have their accountability to the state for the facility. I look forward to continue and welcome the work on the best way to build out these facility funding plans. And I think it's important that they're transparent for both districts and charter schools. So happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Klein. Any questions for Ms. Klein? Yeah, Representative Olson.
This might not be a fair question, but it's my question. The discussion that we've had so far has, between all of the public testimony and the board here, the committee, has centered around the adequate and available language. And you just brought up the 3-year requirement, which I think might actually be the more important part of the bill to charter schools. Is it possible that maybe if we were to just move one idea forward and continue to work on adequate and available, is that really going to put charter schools in a less advantageous place? Because I personally think that the 3-year requirement is the more important thing, and we seem to be on board with it because we're not talking about it.
Ms. Klein?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Olson, yes, I would agree. Originally the conversation started and ended at the 3-year requirement repealer. And I think that is probably the more critical at this point. I'm happy to hear the discussions about the available and adequate. I think it is a direction that the state needs to look at how we arrive at that. But I would agree. I would hate to see the entire bill go down for lack of being able to arrive at how we want to do the available and adequate.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Klein. Any further questions? Yes, Senator Hicks?
Question, kind of unrelated to this, but related, it would be for staff. And so, and I don't know, and maybe Jerry want to weigh in this, but when we see a district that has either a mothballed facility or it's identified in a long-range plan as swing space, but it's not occupied, do we still pay the same amount per square footage for the maintenance of that facility?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks, no, it used to be in rule, but the major maintenance formula, there's an external closure factor on mothballed facilities at 10%. So they generate on the cost replacement value multiplied by the 2% multiplier and then multiplied by 10% so they're discounted 90% on mothballed facilities in the major maintenance formula.
And then that's indexed with China right now. I'm just kidding.
So,
Senator
Mr. Chairman,
Hicks.
that's mothballed. The other side of it was we had testimony from, I believe it was Laramie County School District, that they have a building that's in their long-range plan that they identify for swing space. How is that paid out in the model? Is that different, mothballed, swing space, and then occupied, currently used space? Is there 3 categories there or just the 2?
Matt?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks, the aggregate educational square footage is compared against the maximum allowable, and the district receives the lesser of 115% of their actual or 115% of their allowable. So in Laramie One's case, they have excess square footage above and beyond their 115% allowable. So it's included in their educational square footage in the formula, but in reality, they're not being allocated for all of their educational square feet. And so while it's included as part of the calculation, they're capped at the 115% or the lesser of the 150% of their allowable or their actual. And Mr. Chairman, it doesn't matter if it's identified as swing space or not. They're limited on how much they're going to be allocated through the formula.
Please, go ahead.
Chairman?
Yeah, please.
So just a follow-up question there. Do we have, it's 150%, but do we have districts that are far exceed the 150%?
Hank?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, recall last meeting, there was a presentation by the LSO, and I believe there's 44 districts that exceed the 115% of allowable. There's only 4 districts that are paid on their actual. I can't recall those 4 districts off the top of my head, but we can send you that slide to show those. It shows what their how far over those districts are.
If you would, that'd be very much appreciated.
Yeah,
I
and
wasn't
we
able to make it, had another committee meeting last time, so.
Yeah, we definitely covered that, and for basically a good portion of that was for just educational purposes for the committee coming in. A lot of the committee members brand new. So, all right. Any further public testimony? All right, seeing none, we're a little bit over timeframe here. So what do I think we're going to do? It's 10:13. We'll take a 15-minute break, and then we'll come back and we will figure out what the committee wants to do with this bill, if anything, and we'll go from there. So we are in recess until 10:30. As long as Senator Beitman is online, we have quorum, so, okay. We're gonna, awesome. Welcome, Representative Oakley. Thank you for joining us. We'll go ahead and call the meeting back to order. Good discussions. Appreciate everybody. There it is. All right. Okay, committee. So we're going to pull everything back up here to the dais. For anybody who is just joining us, we are on 24 LSO 165, our charter school leasing discussion bill. And we've gone through public comment, so I'll bring it up to the dais. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I would move bill draft.
Okay. Moved by Senator Hicks, seconded by Representative Olson. All right, we will go ahead and work the bill. Committee, it's a pretty small bill here, so let's go ahead and just work this as it stands with us. Page 1, any amendments to page 1? Doesn't really look like there could be. Let's go ahead and go where I suspect there's probably going to be something. Page 2?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So, Mr. Chairman, let's work through the idea which Tanya laid out of incorporating the new language that we see on page 3 also into page 2, the K paragraph. And so we would insert our new language at the end of the sentence on line 8, page 2. So that language, let's see, it would then read as you're ending the sentence, construction department within the applicable district for operation of the charter school, which shall be included in the school district facility plans required under Wyoming Statute 2115-116. And the purpose there is to, again, make it clear that all of this will be done pursuant to the process that's in statute for vetting a school district facility plan. And we're basically tacking on all of that administrative process, negotiation, and application for an administrative hearing if necessary, everything else. So I think that accomplishes that. And so that would be my motion to replicate that language into page 2, line 8 at the end of the sentence.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second? Second by Senator Hicks. Any discussion on the motion? And again, that motion is to add the same new language from page 3, line 3 in the red underlined, which shall be included in the school district facility plans required underneath Wyoming Statute 2115-116. That'll be putting that on page 2, line 8, after the word school. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed say no. Seeing none, that motion passes. Continuing on down to the bottom of page 2 and into page 3, any further discussion and or motions here? All right, seeing none. Committee, any discussion on the bill? Senator Rothfuss.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to support the bill. I don't know if we have this perfect. I do think that section 2 is essential for us to move forward, so the bill is necessary. I am still not excited about the process that we have in place with regard to how we're handling charter school facilities as they relate to school districts. I think it's fair to say that with the bill we passed providing for a statewide authorizer for charter schools, that we have screwed things up for school facilities and how charter schools relate to school districts. That was us. We did that, and we need to fix that. So it's the legislature's fault. It's our obligation to try and fix it. I don't know that this fixes it. This pushes it a little bit in a direction that provides a little bit more clarity. I think it still needs a lot of work, but I do find this to be an improvement relative to where we are now, and it also gives us a vehicle to maybe think about it a little bit better. So it's a step in the right direction, albeit not a solution.
Okay.
That's a strong aye vote, right?
Committee, any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Representative Harshman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just comment quickly. I think section 2 is really important as we eliminated the double funding last year, the 3 years of operation. So that repealer is really important. The rest of this bill, I think the problem that the bill is going to run into is on line 5, page 2. I mean, I think the rest of it, people can probably get behind it. But I think, and you heard some of the testimony of it, I just think the way we've got this working now where people are talking, I think is going to work. But when you say, the state starts making directives like this on locally elected people who, as a conservative state, we generally avoid doing, right? I think it was referenced in some of the testimony, the takings of a locally owned building. But I think also the taking of a decision by a locally elected school board who run in bigger elections than most of us. But so I'm going to back up, Mr. Chairman, if could, page 2, line 5, and just remove that proposed new language, beginning with and available, and then just continue with the current statute. And again, I think the important part of this, I think the language we added is good, and that current amendment that Senator Rothfuss just proposed, but I think section 2 is really the key to this bill. And I think line 5 gives this bill a chance of not making it. And so I think to really solve the problem and have a good, clean bill, I'd propose, if I get a second, on line 5, remove that proposed new language. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so there is a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to second it for the point of discussion. I might not even vote for it, but I think it's important to think this through. The concern I have with removing it is that it creates a circumstance where the interpretation, as I understand it, from the AG would be at that point, there's no obligation for the school district, even if there is deemed to be available and adequate facility. So let's say the perfect situation occurs, there's an open school, the district can just say, no, we don't want to do that. I don't know if there's a way that we could rephrase this. I don't know what we could do to make it not the takings that I agree with Representative Harshman about. I think that is a concern, particularly your pre-97 buildings, flat out takings, right? Paid for by the local school district, not the state's asset. And you have a circumstance where the state can come in and say, oh, you're gonna put students there, we say so. I don't even know how that would quite fly. That would be some constitutional concerns. That's not addressed, but Representative Harshman or anyone else, is there a way that we can, rather than eliminate this, find something that threads the needle?
Okay, committee? Any further discussion? Senator Hicks?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know it's so much the language that says, because it's just to take off where Senator Rothfuss left off. It says, and the school district shall make available space which is deemed available and adequate. The testimony we had was not that the school districts wouldn't be opposed to making that space available if it was excess space. I think that's the point that Senator Rothfuss is getting to. Their concern is available and adequate, and how we define available was really the question we're hearing, not that, at least from the testimony from the districts that we had here, said, look, if the space is available, and it's adequate and we have no plans to use it, we wouldn't necessarily be opposed to giving that to a charter school. So I don't see that's the issue as much as it's the determination of if it's deemed available by SBC. And so I think we can work on that. I think we should support this and then maybe look at this, but that's what I heard from the districts, not that they wouldn't be opposed to if it was determined that it was available and adequate.
Okay.
And I do think this does put a commitment on the school districts then to have to enter into that collaborative process and hopefully not get to an SBC determination.
Committee, any further discussion? All right. So I am going to say I think that's exactly where we're trying to get to is, and I appreciate the term, thread the needle here. What we have, the reason that this came up was a discussion from the AG's office that we really do come into a situation where if a charter school comes in, state authorized charter school comes in, and we don't have this language in there, the interpretation from a few people is that this is just, we have to have something in there, right? So that's why I brought this forward, was a little bit of statutory conflict, and kind of the determination was to bring this forward, see if we can't clean this up. I think one of the biggest ideas that comes out of today and last meeting with this particular bill is we do have a mess with charter schools. Plain and simple, it's going to be a tough mess, and it's going to be a little while until we work this through. And I think Senator Hicks offline told me it's probably going to be here for the next decade until we get things going. I would venture to guess that we probably go even longer than that because we have a select committee for school facilities. So it's probably going to be maybe a select committee on charter school facilities at some point. So I appreciate the notion, and I do understand that there's concern here about the rub that this might make, but I do think that the adopted motion that we have already, making sure that this goes in line with the rest of the process that's outlined in statute through 2115, 116, I think absolves a little bit of the concerns and the heartburn. If it still doesn't, this isn't going into law today. This is just putting us up as an opportunity to move forward here. And if we need to clean this up, everybody here on this committee is always open to working these bills and making sure that we do it right. I'd like to say the first time, but this can be second, third time, maybe the fourth time's a charm. So with that, committee, all those in favor of the motion on the table, which is to strike the new language on page 2, line 5, please vote in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no.
No.
No. That motion fails. Committee, any further amendments?
Call for the question.
Question being called. Ashley, can I get a roll call, please, on 24 LSO 165 as amended?
Mr. Chairman, you did half of my job for me. Senator Beitman?
Aye.
Senator Hicks?
Aye.
Senator McEwen? Excused. Senator Rothfuss?
Aye.
Representative Harshman?
Aye.
Representative Oakley?
Aye.
Representative Olson?
Aye.
Representative Storer?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Landon is excused. Chairman Brown?
Aye.
You have 8 ayes and 2 excused.
Okay.
Senate file or House bill?
We'll have to make that determination here shortly. We'll wait on that. There's nothing forcing us on that one right now. So, all right. So that moves us into our next portion of the agenda. Our next portion of the agenda is the school facilities budget. I do want to let the public know that I have invited members of the Joint Appropriations Committee to join us through this process. This is a little bit of an effort. Any of those who also pay attention to the Joint Education Committee also know that we go through a process every year where we do an external cost adjustment, and we have consultants that come in, make their recommendations, and we hear the conversation one time as opposed to having to bring that consultant back in multiple times. That was kind of my opportunity here today, is to try to reduce the amount of discussion in appropriations where possible. So what we will do is I will open this up for any members of appropriations, whether they're online. I think we have 1 or 2 that may join online. We also have a few here in person. They will be acting in their official capacity as JAC members to ask questions. Of course, they will not have any opportunity to make any votes or anything like that, but just to let the public know what the process is and the reason behind my madness here. So Tanya, I believe we have you up first. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, you have the whole crew.
I've got everybody. Okay, so, all right. Well, again, I also want to just publicly thank the 3 of you, and also Ashley, because Ashley has put countless hours in making sure all these packets and everything are put together for us. But thank you guys so much for all the work that you guys do. You guys are a small crew, and you guys have definitely taken on the reins. So thank you guys. When you guys are ready, please just introduce yourselves for everybody, and floor's yours.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, Tanya Heitrug, Operations Administrator, Legislative Service Office.
Mr. Chairman, Matt Wilmarth, LSO Senior School Finance Analyst.
Mr. Chairman, Hank Hoversland, Associate Fiscal Analyst, LSO.
Tanya, I think you're going to start us off. Is that right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it's my intent to walk you through the Bill 24 LSO 255 K-12 School Facilities Appropriations.
And I just want to make sure we're all working on the same one. This is working draft point 3. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
Okay. All right. Whenever you're ready.
Members of the committee, this bill comes to you incorporating the recommendations by the State Construction Department that were made at the September meeting. It appropriates $166,145,759 for the school capital construction needs for funding year 25-26. I would note that that figure includes the $700,000 for engineering and technical. That, of course, is in the staff comment, but doesn't appear in the contents of the bill. This does not include the operational costs or major maintenance costs. Those, recall, are funded through Agency 27 in the budget bill. And as a reminder, in recent years, this bill has made its way into the larger budget bill through Section 313. The appropriations in this bill are from the Public School Foundation Program account. Recall, a bill was passed in the last session that will eliminate the school facilities capital construction account as well as the major maintenance sub-account within the SIPA. And that was through Chapter 173. Moving on to the contents of the bill, Section 1, which begins on page 2, line 35, begins the appropriations. Subsection A on lines 37 and 38 provides that this section contains funds for K-12 school facility buildings. Subsection B, page 3, lines 1 through 8 designates funds for charter school and modular leases, acquisition of a portion of a state facility in Natrona County, professional consulting expertise for the period beginning July 1st of 2024 and ending June 30th of 2026. And those funds that I mentioned will revert on June 30th of 2026 if they're unspent. Subsection C contains similar language, although it's for component funding, demolition, design and construction for school buildings, design and construction of ancillary facilities, and unanticipated amounts. Those amounts, which will come later in the bill, remain with the agency until the project is complete. Subsection D, beginning on page 3, line 21, and continuing on to page 4, line 4, authorizes the commission to submit a supplemental budget for the period beginning July 1st of 2025 through June 30th of 2026. This is actually authorized by statute and just confirms that ability. Moving on to the next page, page 4, subsection E, which can be found on line 16 through 16, requires the commission adhere to the amounts reported by the commission for each project to the extent practicable. And there's been a lot of discussion about appropriation for design versus construction funding. And recall, there was a bill last year by this committee which authorizes the legislature to appropriate funds in a lump sum manner for those. However, the agency is required to report those by project phase. And that's important because there's a statutory provision that doesn't allow them to move those funds between project phases without approval of the governor.
Tanya, that's also documented with a B11, correct? Or is that only at a certain threshold?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that is correct, but I'll find the statutory site and confirm that after going through the bill if that is acceptable.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on, page 4, subsection F, which is found on lines 18 through 23, states the amounts appropriated by Subsection 8 are not entitlements. These are the funds appropriated. However, we know that the project budgets many times are lesser than the amounts appropriated. Subsection G, page 5, lines 2 through 12, requires the State Construction Department to report on the deployment of funds appropriated, the schedule associated with the project completion, and any deviation. That also would mention is statutorily required in a couple of places, but historically we've included it here as well. Subsection H, page 5, line 14 through page 10, line 15 contains the appropriations for the K-12 school facilities. Paragraph 1, found on page 5, line 18 through page 6, line 9, appropriates $2,267,302 for charter school leases for Albany County School District Number 1 and for 2 facilities located in Laramie County Number 1. Paragraph 2 on page 6, lines 11 through 21 appropriates $52,125 for modular leases in 3 buildings in Laramie County School District Number 1. Moving on, page 7, on the bottom of page 6, paragraph 3, beginning on line 23 of page 6 and moving on to the entirety of page 7, appropriates $37,138,591 to 12 school districts for component projects. I would mention at this juncture that the project found on page 7, line 10, Converse County Number 1 for a middle school for $3,732,426 was funded in the 2022 session. The State Construction Department has confirmed this and has also confirmed that it can be removed. I would note that in the event that the committee moves to remove that, that will also change the unanticipated funds, which are found later in the bill, which are a percentage of the construction dollars. Paragraph 4 on the page 8, lines 1 through 8 appropriates $2,634,698 for demolition projects in Platte County School District Number 1 and Albany County School District Number 1. Paragraph 5, page 8, line 13 through page 9, line 16 appropriates $80,186,767 for design and construction projects in 4 school districts. I would note that a number of these projects, which is contained in your meeting packet, I believe behind tab 3, include sort of the second phase for funds that are allocated through the $95 million, which recall last year this body appropriated $100 million, $5 million for planning, and $95 million to be used for design and construction in accordance with the 2023 Facility Needs Index and the 2023 Capacity Index.
Tanya, just to make sure I understand that correctly and make sure everybody here on the committee hears this the same way, that is to ensure that the 2023 FCA that we did is what is used, and only the projects that are identified in that are to be used. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that is the provision of Section 313 currently.
Okay, thank you.
And I would note on this subject, Matt Wilmarth from LSO late yesterday put together a document which outlines those appropriations contained in this budget bill, along with those from the $95 million, with the FCI scores from 2016, as well as those from the 2023 assessment. It's a great document to sort of give you a snapshot, one place to look for all of the information relative to the projects. And Matt will be sending that out. We haven't had an opportunity to do that. He completed it at approximately 8 p.m. last night.
Senator Hicks? He's going to send it out.
Oh, gotta send it. All right.
Yep, he got it done late last night. So Matt, that's what you get for working late last night, is everybody wants their hands on it now, so.
And Mr. Chairman, we can actually make copies and bring it back to the committee here shortly. Moving on, after demolition, paragraph 5, page 8, line 13 through page 9, line 6. These are the appropriations that I just mentioned. Page 9, paragraph 6 through line 21 appropriates $29,432,710 dollars for ancillary projects in 3 school districts. And I would note in the documents that you received from the State Construction Department, some of those indicate that these are construction dollars only when these two amounts are combined. But in conversations with Laura Anderson after our September meeting, she did provide through an email these projects broken out by construction and design, and that's what's incorporated in this bill. Page 9, line 23 contains paragraph 7 onto page 10, line 3. This appropriates $3.5 million for Natrona County to transfer ownership of a portion of an elementary school that's currently owned by the state. And the one note I would make on this is that there is precedent for the state building commission transferring ownership of a state facility to a school district without compensation. So just sort of keep that in the back of your mind. It was a footnote in a budget bill related to the Snowy Range Academy. The state bought that building and then was directed through budget footnote to transfer ownership to that school district.
Senator Hicks? Sure. Hit your mic for me, would you please?
Mr. Chairman, so the question on that is where this is a state-owned building, there's a constitutional provision that says all state-owned property shall go to public auction. How are we getting around the Constitution by just giving the school district money to buy a state building? So if you can help me out with that, I'd appreciate it.
Ms. Heitrick?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks, there's a memo that we can send you that we prepared last year on this issue. You're correct, there's both statutory and a constitutional provision. I mentioned that the precedent, and I'm curious, I don't know exactly what the interpretation was at that time when that building was transferred from the state building inventory to Albany County School District Number 1, but I suspect there was an interpretation that they are a political subdivision. In many instances, school districts are state agencies for certain provisions of the statutes, and perhaps that's why that occurred, but you are correct on citing that constitutional provision.
Okay.
Moving on.
Ms. Heitrick, we had a couple of members of the Appropriations Committee come in the middle of your going. Joint Appropriations Committee, please, by any stretch of the imagination, if you guys have questions while we're going along, you guys have full authority to snag my attention and interrupt as you deem fit. My goal with this and having you guys join us was to try to reduce the amount of time that not only I have to explain the budget, but also the department and LSO back to you guys. So if you guys do have questions, please feel free to chime in. Yes, Senator Hicks.
I'm going to help my previous Appropriations Committee chairman out and act like an appropriator here. So the question I have is just to back up to the previous section, subsection 6 on the ancillary building projects. Do these go through also a condition rating, an FCI, a facility condition index? And so these are the ones that ranked out with the 0.3 or higher under the facilities condition index for the ancillary buildings?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks, if you look in your meeting packet under tab 4 as submitted by the State Construction Department, there are facilities that are, quote, non-educational, and there are FCI scores associated with those. In the packet that I have, and I know they submitted an addendum to this, but it's page 47 of 71. And Mr. Haversland has additional information.
Page 55 is non-educational.
Yeah, so, Mr. Chairman.
Hold on just a second. Hank, did you want to go through yours and then see if that answers your question,
Yeah,
Senator?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks, the only thing I would say on your point 3, I think page 38 of the departments on their cover memo for tab 4, they say that the non-educational cut list is 0.6. So they try and address anything 0.6 and above. And these were assessed in the 2023 assessment along with the educational buildings.
Okay. And then Senator, did you have a follow-up on that?
Well, I'm looking at this and that's educational condition.
Page 55.
55.
55. I'm sure the answer to my question is on page 55. I just got to get there.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks, it's actually page 47 would show the 2023 FCI as well as the 2016 FCI. So that's going to be the most up-to-date. Starting on page
Page
47 is the non-educational condition list from the department.
Well, that should be both, yeah.
And Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks, those that are highlighted have appropriations either through the 95 million or through this budget bill that we're discussing now. And the document that Mr. Wilmarth puts together will clarify that.
Okay, maybe that document clarifies it, Mr. Chairman, but when I look at this list now, there's 4 of them that are highlighted that show up in the bill. But there's three other ones in there, and 2 of those are the highest ranking. Why do they not show up under the ancillary building projects?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks, the cover memo from the State Construction Department indicated that those are enhancements, projects 1, 2, 6, and I believe 8, but 8 I'm less certain about.
Require local funding for those enhancements, is that correct?
Yeah, Senator Hicks, as Tanya was just saying, the way that this came to you guys as well as me and everybody else, each one of these tables has a cover sheet memo kind of explaining what you're going to be going into to try to explain each section of this as it goes through. So yes, as Tanya just said, that was the intent. And I believe if you still hold on to that question when Jerry comes up, I'm sure Jerry will be more than happy to answer that for you. Okay. Thank you, Senator. Tanya, when you're ready, I think we were just getting ready to go on. We were just finishing up the discussion on page 10 at the top there. Oh, hold on, Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you. So on top of page 10, as we were finishing the discussion of the land acquisition, the $3.5 million, where will that transaction be washed? Because the discussion has always been $3.5 million in this budget, and then $3.5 million will be taken away elsewhere. My guess, though, a bit of a challenge is that there have to be a coinciding transfer, because this is going to be coming from the school foundation program, and that other budget is going to be presumably a general fund budget, I believe. Where do we expect in the budget that $3.5 million to be compensated for, so it's a zero cost?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, great question. You could add a directive specifically that the proceeds from this sale go back to the school foundation program account.
So we write a check to ourselves.
In this legislation, I mean, would that be a fair?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, I think you could put it in a separate section or separate subsection in this, or as part of the paragraph language, or a footnote to agency 27. I think there's a couple ways that you could address that.
Okay. And if it can go in this bill, it might just be clean to have it in this bill, recognizing that this all probably ends up in the budget bill to begin with. But I think just so that it's not missed, it's important to have that. So thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, yes, I think you can add a separate section where that will end up in the budget bill. You could ask your fellow appropriators sitting here.
Okay. Tanya, please, if you'd like to finish
Yes.
off anything with the 3.5, or if you're ready to move on, you're more than welcome to.
No, I've concluded the comments on that particular provision. Page 10, lines 5 through 10 on page 10 appropriates $1 million for the professional consulting expertise and other administrative costs. Historically, this has been utilized for most cost-effective remedies studies. Recall, again, in the 2023 legislation, this body appropriated $5 million for that purpose. The last provision, paragraph 9 on lines 12 through 15, appropriates $9,233,566 for the unanticipated costs associated with paragraphs 3 through 8, and those paragraphs are fundings for components, demolition, design and construction of K-12 and ancillary buildings, acquisition of the property, and professional consulting expertise. As I mentioned, in the event that the project from the component list is eliminated, there would be a reduction in accordance in this particular provision as well. Page 10, line 17 is the effective date, and the appropriations are effective July 1st of 2024.
All right. Hank.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just back to your previous question on design, moving between design and construction. This appears in statute 2115-119 C, which says that the department, with the express approval of the governor, can transfer up to 15% of total funds appropriated between project phases. This does not require a B11, but I believe historically it has been executed through a B11 by the department. But I think the department could answer that question a little better than we could.
Okay.
But that happens.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, is it going to depend on how the appropriation is set up by the agency? So,
Okay.
And how historical appropriations have occurred. So if it's in the same unit, it's likely not going to have to require any B11. It may require a documentation B11, or it may require a full B11. It just depends on, one, how the appropriation is done by the legislature, but also how the agency sets it up within their budget.
Mr. Chairman, the final remark that I would have is in the notes, the staff comment, it does note that there are not priorities designated for these projects. Typically in the section 313, you would have the column that has, 0701, 02, or whatever, designating the priority. And in response to that, the agency did provide tab 8, which prioritizes these expenditures. And so that's also another option for you. If you'd like this bill draft to look similar to in years past, you could incorporate the priority designations, which are included in tab 8. I would note again on the ancillary facilities, I think those are combined construction and design costs, but Ms. Anderson from the State Construction Department did provide the level of detail that's in the bill draft.
Okay. Okay, committee. Matt, Hank, do you guys have anything before we move up to questions? Okay, committee, it's pretty cut and dry as far as the budget itself goes. Is there any discussion and or questions for staff at this point? Okay. Tanya, my only question for you, and actually I think this will probably be better suited for Jerry, so I'll just wait for Jerry on this one. With that, you guys are good, and we'll go ahead and call up Jerry. Jerry, you rested and recuperated here? Welcome back, Chief. Jerry. Just let us know where you guys would like to start. I'm suspecting tab 3, if I remember right. Is that right? Nope, that's the charter school. I think it, no, that's right. Tab 3 goes into the 95 million. I'm guessing that's where you guys would want to start, but I'll take you guys at your pleasure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tab 3, and we have updated and updated and updated and sent LSO to you a variety of information as we've cleaned it up, found that there wasn't a word wrap on it. So we will wait until we think everybody has the right document. But I have put a spreadsheet together that I was tracking and using based on a lot of the requests from the select from the first meeting. So I'll just refer to it as this spreadsheet right here. We tried to renumber it, page number it, so it would stay in with your program. So it's called 36A and 37A and 37B. And so we can start with that, and please, I'm sure if there are questions, we can stop and address those. So in the last meeting, and this is my first budget session I've been through, plus the short staff, so I appreciate everyone's grace as we try to figure this out. We're putting a 25-26 budget bill together, but the question was asked, what's going on with the 95 million from the last appropriation? So we called that out, and I would first say, which, has been discussed all summer and all fall, that the out of alignment on the funding and the completion of the FCA, FCI, we do have the notation on top here. We are trying to budget right now, but we are not going to fund until the Mercer studies have been accomplished and approved by the commission. But stepping down, and Tanya is correct, Laura did in tab 8, I believe it is, break it out into design and construction. So this is what helped me follow along through here, but we did break it out for you. So when we look at the 95 million, one of the things that came to be is in looking at how the money is appropriated, we had an existing project on here, and it's under design construction for Campbell 1 called Little Powder. And in Little Powder, it was determined that 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, the budget spreadsheet was incorrect in 2 areas. And so we made that adjustment. We have the write-up on this. We took it through the commission approved. And then it was shared with me that I could request this money out of this pot here, because if you follow the language of the 95 and a Mercer, all that had taken place, and it just taken place 3 years prior. So that's the understanding that I'm in. What this does is just a little bit of background on them. The dollar per square foot was configured on our budget worksheet on the wrong grade level configuration. And then secondly, at about the time this was done, the commission was switching from an FF&E to an FC&E formula for furniture and equipment. And so that was not calculated correctly. With those two, now that the district is in the 60% design, YDOT comes along and says, we want a turn lane for deceleration, because you're out in the middle of a 70 mile an hour nowhere and someone's going to pull out in front of that. So instead of looking at unanticipated, which it isn't truly unanticipated if you're being told at 35% design that this is required, and having to adjust appropriation anyway for the other 2 reasons, we've got the full commission write-up on this, and we can share it if the select wanted. So that 3.395 corrects all 3 of those situations with the Little Powder School. Is there any questions regarding that?
And I just want to make sure that, so the 3.395, you're taking that out of the 95 million. Was that addressed in the 2023? Because my concern with that is the 2023 language that we had from this budget specifically says that it had to have been studied and it had to have come out of the 2023 FCI studies. Was Little Powder studied during that time frame, or are we utilizing?
It was studied before, and what's been explained to me is that also part of that intent, and not only the 2023 FCA, FCI, was if it had an FCA, FCI. So I'm going with that interpretation and all.
Okay.
Okay. That's what's been shared with me.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll probably need to look back at that, but that's my only question on that portion. Any other good questions, Senator? Senator Hicks, and then Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's just a typo, but if you look over there under the updated, it says for this project, for Little Powder, that it was updated on 2013. I think that's 2020. It's just a typo, is it not?
Oh.
Yep, I think so.
It doesn't stop getting embarrassing. Yes, yes, that's true. Sorry.
Representative Larson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Director Vincent. If the worst thing we have happen is you got the wrong year, we're doing good.
I would agree.
But help me understand, the project has already been appropriated, so were there funds already appropriated for that? Was that the 3.1? And if that was appropriated, then why is it coming out of the 95 if it was already, walk me through that.
Sure. Mr.
Please,
Chair,
Director.
and Representative Larson. The appropriation, what we're calling out here in the comments, sir, is the project had its own appropriation of, I think, 6.3 million. And then what I'm trying to notate here is in the commission packet, we were 3.128 would have been the increase in the appropriation when we submitted that by the end of August. And since then, we had a finalized meeting with YDOT and what that turn lane looked like. So I'm trying to give you almost a live track change on how it came from the original budget to the 3.128, in case someone saw that number and said, why is that number different than 3.395? And the difference in there is the YDOT turn lane plus the design and the inspection of that.
Mr. Chairman, so then coming out of the 95 billion, isn't that full 3.395? It's just a difference between that number and the 3.1?
Mr. Chair, correct.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, Senator Hicks and then Senator Rothfuss.
So my question is why did it come out of the 95 million when we still had the contingency fund within the budget? And why didn't we take that out of contingency, which I think that's the intent of the contingency fund? Is it zeroed out that we had to go to the 95 million?
Mr. Chair and Senator Hicks, it is not zeroed out. It is not a lot of money, and they are not done with design yet, let alone bidding. And typically, we take the contingency and see what bid day looks like and either use contingency to make it whole, or if there's an unforeseen during that timeframe. And so that's why we stayed away from the contingency. We looked at contingency within the project. You look at inflationary funds, which are set aside, and we can talk about those this afternoon. And then we look at unanticipated. And we have had a history, and we promised everyone here, when we went onto the floor and got the inflation money set aside for both sides of our house, that inflation was to make bid day whole, not now. You know, and contingencies are unforeseen throughout the rest of the diligence and design on the project. And then unanticipated, I didn't feel that we should be having that conversation when we are aware of a YDOT issue at 35%. I think it's setting a tone for the rest of the districts too.
Mr. Chairman, just a footnote for my friend in appropriation, maybe that ought to come out of the transportation fund.
Representative Larson.
I'm feeling that vibe too. Okay. But Mr. Chairman, Director Vincent, going back to that, and I apologize, just trying to understand this, this particular one. So it was funded, again, I want to just make sure I'm seeing it right. It was funded at 3.1 previously.
Mr. Chair, no, and this is going to be a long day, and you're going to ask me a lot of detailed questions, so please hang in there with me. The chief just pointed out, I thought Representative Larson was saying that this 3.395 is the difference between the original appropriation and what it's going to take. We are not putting in the 95 budget the difference between 3.1 and 3.395. So I apologize.
Okay, so I think I know what you're asking, and I'm going to ask it in a different way. The original appropriation, I think I heard you say was 6.1 million. That was the original appropriation underneath Little Powder K through 8.
Correct, I can confirm it, yeah.
What year was that?
So let's go ahead and start there. Okay, we've got hands flying. Yeah, we do. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and let Hank interrupt here.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, this was appropriated in the 2022 budget session. And the construction number was 4.9 million. Design was 770,000 approximately. And demolition was 647,000.
Gotcha.
This also had unanticipated of 380,000 for its 6%, but I would note that in the budget bills, section 313, unanticipated costs total for those projects was 4.25 million, and there's nothing in that saying that it can't be used more than the 6% that is used to budget that in the budget bill. That's nowhere. And then, as I think it was brought up earlier, there was inflationary funds appropriated for this project last session in 19.5 thousand on demolition, and then almost 5 million for the construction. There was no design inflationary funds because the department indicated to LSO and the Joint Appropriations Committee that they had signed a design contract and they would not need design inflationary funds for that. So there was no inflationary funds on that, but it was on the demolition and construction portions. So in total, the project has seen 8.2 million so far, including 2022 and 2023 sessions with inflationary, and then it's design, demolition, and construction funding.
Okay. So now I'm going to take a step back, and I think I know where you're headed. I want to, and then I'll come back to you if this doesn't answer it. So we've received, you guys have been appropriated $8.2 million for Little Powder K through 8. You are now going to take an additional 3.395 out of the 95 million, bringing this to, let's just call it 11.5 to do this. And that's what's needed to finish building off this school. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Representative Larson, does that answer your question?
Yes, and I'm sorry, I apologize for not being able to gather that, but that's what I was looking for. The 3.395 is an additional request out of the 95. That's what I was wanting to know. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And Mr. Chair, the reason also that we didn't look at the inflationary funds for that is not only have they not had a bid day yet, but in this number, with the district trying to get to 100% by January and bid, we are within the year of this going out and being bid from inflation standpoint. So that is wrapped into this number. So we didn't think there need to be a double bump on inflation.
Okay. And so I just want to make sure that when I mean, at this point, you guys have the authority on the 3.395 million because that's what we've given to you guys. And it is important for us to notice that, but I want to make sure that we're also directly correlating this back to the budget request. This is in direct relation to the budget request, which on page 7, line 10, has $3.7 million in the budget request for Campbell 1. That is to be removed, and that is because you're taking it out of the 2023. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, then I believe that's correct. I'm looking.
Mr. Chairman, are
Please
you
bring it.
referencing the amendment that I spoke of?
Correct.
That is not correct.
That is not Little Powder.
The project
Yeah,
that we
that's
referenced
Converse.
is component level funding. It's Converse 1. It's $3.7 million.
Okay.
On page 7, line 10.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got these laid out here.
Lots of numbers.
Yes.
We want 2 more.
All right. Committees, any other questions at this point? Okay, Jerry. We'll continue to pepper as needed, but
Yeah, Mr. Chair, that was supposed to be the easy one. This is going to be a long day. So the second thing that would bring to your attention is we do have these, even in my spreadsheet with the design and design construction. One of the questions that was brought up, and we have changed it in the spreadsheet, but I am told that the reason that it's not changed in tab 8 is because Laura Anderson, our administrator for finance and operations, takes that straight from the IBARs. And I have told that we get in a real problem if we start changing the name of something from the IBARs as it moves on. So for the September 1 commission approval, the deadline for the budget, we were still looking at, if you will look at Laramie 1 in the 95 million, and as well as in the 25-26, it was called elementary number 1 and elementary number 2. And the rationale for that was we are doing a district-wide Mercer with the district. In fact, we'll have a kickoff meeting in the next few weeks. So look at all elementary schools. And if you look at the bottom of the page 337C, they are flagging for 6 schools, 3 under condition, 3 under capacity. And the conditioned schools are in that vein where 2 of them will be on the front end of Mercer for replacement, which is why we have the dollars in here for the project as well as the demolition. The rationale at the time was calling them number 1 and number 2 was also for the district's sake, as we head down the Mercer and district-wide, knowing that the district has a master plan that wants to engage tearing down 6 and building 3, knowing that yet we have our FCI scores to follow, and that the outcome of that would be 2 schools somewhere would tear down 2 others. That was too confusing. So we just went straight back and called them. I approached the district and I said, I hope this doesn't cause heartache because you're focusing on your south, but we want to name these schools are being asked. So if you go to your education list, which we can talk about later, elementary, the number 1 is called Hobbs Elementary in the FCA, in the FCI, and on our education list. So we just named it. We were asked to put it out there and it looked ambiguous, and so we did. When you look at the school in the 25-26 budget that was referred to as elementary number 2, score-wise, it is Buffalo Ridge. Jessup is immediately behind it. And in conversations with the district, we said we certainly will do a Mercer. We certainly will come out in December, January, like with all districts, and reconcile the database. What do you feel about Hobbs? Yes. What do you feel about Buffalo Ridge? Possibly Jessup, not Buffalo Ridge. Why? Well, because we just spent $4 million of repairs. And when we went back and looked at the scores, and we'll have the conversation with the district in November, December, when looked at the scores, it was for things that really wouldn't show up from an FCA, FCI standpoint. It wasn't building envelope. It doesn't get at the main component pieces that have a life cycle to them. They did some paint, they did some carpet, they did a number of things to make the school look a lot better. But we'll have that conversation with them. We don't think that it changed the FCI. So we just called them out strictly for what they are, Buffalo Ridge and Hobbs.
Okay, Representative Larson, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just slow and I apologize. So I'd like to go back to Campbell 1. And it's more of a question, Jerry, because I think I heard it, is there may be some question on this additional 3.3 million per the footnote in our 2023 supplemental budget bill requirements for how we access that 95 million, whether this 3.3 million qualifies. And so I don't think the argument here is that we need to get that, but my question would be then, if we find that that doesn't qualify under the conditions of the footnote in this last supplemental budget bill, then we would just need to make that an additional budget request. Is that a fair assessment?
Mr. Chair, Representative Larson, that's the only way to do it from what I see it. If it's deemed not 95, then we would make the request that it be in the 25-26.
And go ahead, finish off.
So that's it. It throws another wrench in that at 60% design, 100% by January, that then they would finish design, not knowing if this money is included in the end of the design and the finish of the design, and then they have to wait a year and a half before they bid, which is going to be higher, and then we're going to be dipping in the inflation money. But the thought was, when I was told this could go here, was you keep the project flowing. You flow it through design, you flow it on the street, you get it done. These are small projects, very rural. They're going to be difficult to get bidders in the bid. So it kept the project and the architect and the district moving. So yes.
Yeah. I
So
think
succinctly, what Representative Larson is saying is true.
Follow up then Jerry, so if there's a couple, there are those conditions surrounding this appropriation to keep it on track, that those funds need to be available sooner than later. Am I correct?
Mr. Chair, yes, that was part
Okay.
of the rationale, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So I think I'm still stuck and we'll work through this. I am concerned. I mean, I think where I'm concerned is exactly what Representative Larson is saying, and I understand what you're trying to do, and I appreciate trying to keep the project moving. What I also want to make sure we're doing is following statute that we put into place. So I'll work, maybe see if there's a way that we can work through appropriations to make that money available immediately, something along those lines, somewhere. We have the authority to do that. So, but as it stands right now, I think my concern is that was not listed. I did not see it listed in the 2023 FCI. So as it went through, or FCA, sorry, went through there, with it not being on there, I feel like that's tied directly to last year's budget, and it says that's what it has to be tied to. So I think we need to make sure that we're following that. But
Mr. Chairman, in fairness to the agency, they made this based on information they had received. So they made this-
certainly.
So it's not pointing a finger at the department other than identifying a problem we have to somehow rectify.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. Okay, Jerry?
I was going to say, as with you, I did not sleep in a Holiday Inn last night, and I'm not a lawyer. So, yeah, please look into it. Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. So those were two of the bigger questions, what are these elementary schools doing here for Laramie 1, and why are they called elementary number 1 and number 2? The other question that was brought up, and it is delineated in tab 8, is why are they design construction together? And my answer to that and my working spreadsheet here is the district is just finishing Coyote Ridge Elementary School. It is the prototype of I think about a 5-year gap going back to Meadowlark, and that the district is ready to take that design construction component in a prototype and incorporate any change orders if they're not site related, if they're building related, and roll this out immediately and put it back out on the street. It's a pending, approved Mercer of all their elementary schools. So in my mind, what this looked like when I was tracking it here is more of a design build. It's ready to go. It's stamped, it's on the shelf. So that's why I looked at it in this regard. Then when I was informed that we need to break these out, we did exactly that, and it's back here. So that was a question that was brought up regarding my spreadsheet.
Yep.
And this is really my thinking. This is my brain right here. So it doesn't, if you can switch between my brain and tab 8, that's how and then you switch over to the bill, and I'm putting all three of these together, so.
Well, I appreciate you being here to help us weed through that, because there's been some questions on that. I do have a question as we go back to the Buffalo Ridge Elementary School. And as we look at that just happens to sit in my district. And so, yeah, I'd love to put a brand new school in there. My concern is as we go through the discussions with Laramie County 1, if they don't replace that school, it's going to continue to sit up there in the top of the FCA index. And so I guess I'm ultimately concerned, number one, about the scoring of that. And I think I've raised that multiple times, knowing that they put in $4.5 million in renovations. It'll probably never reach capacity level. It's an incredibly small school. But I guess at the end of the day, if we're going to address that, how does that ultimately, what is the mechanism that you guys are utilizing to make sure that, okay, if we're not going to use Buffalo Ridge, it's notated. We have the discussion with the district that they don't want to do this and that we're not going to have this come back on us. What are we doing to make sure that this is solidified? Because as it stands through your guys' rules, there's not really much of a difference for them to say, too bad, we don't want it. We should be rebuilding Buffalo Ridge. So what are we doing in that case?
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, and I'll try to step into that space, going through, this is a unique situation, going through looking at all of their elementaries, aligning it with the current master plan that they have and how they want to demo and for operational costs too, demo 6 and build 3. The question here for me is taking all 6 of these schools into the Mercer, and that with our Mercer consultant and our department, we sit down with the district and find out, we talked about it a number of times today, the district knows what's going on with their districts. I don't know the best way to crosswalk until we get a Mercer done, and the outcome of the Mercer says, not Buffalo Ridge, but Jessup, but something else. And then all that is going to have to be taken before the commission in that Mercer study with the district, with the consultant, right alongside of us having that conversation with the commission so that there is a revised motion, if you will, that comes out of that. And that's what I'm looking at right now. It's unique that we have 6 flagging. They have needs and is similar to the 6, but other. And I think I don't want to get too far ahead of what the Mercer, I don't want to predetermine the Mercer, but I have gone over their master plan with them, at length. And so we're just trying to marry these two together. But you bring up a good point that, we've talked about it before, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it again. The FCI is not a determinant. It's a starting place and it's a conversation. And that's exactly why we're going to roll into a Mercer to see what these schools, these 6 schools say to us, what they say to the district, and what they say to the community. And we'll bring it back to a commission meeting.
Okay, committee, any further questions here? Representative Walters, if you'd like to join us up on the dais, you're more than welcome to, same as Senator Guru. We have this open for you guys, not just for information sharing, but also if you guys have questions. So please feel free to come up and sit on the dais if you'd like. Jerry, the floor is back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the 95 million, and if you're going to look at Little Powder in that same way, the Teton Transportation Center is flagged strictly on condition. They also did a 3.8 on capacity. We did a Mercer on that facility and took it to the commission, and it was approved by the commission. And same thing that if you're going to look at the language of what the 2023 specifically said, well, I'm sorry, we just finished that, and we did get 2023 right instead of 2013 over on the footnote. So that was, okay, I started to go there. We should be good on that one. And that it is a Mercer that was conducted per the 2023, and it's coming out of the 95 million. Is there any questions regarding that project by anyone?
Seeing none, go ahead.
Okay. And then I guess maybe a general comment, Mr. Chair, for both the 95 million and the 25-26 budget. We were seeing a lot of non-educational ancillary scores that were flagging. The research that I did, we have almost a full turnover in our department there, is we hadn't done a non-educational building unless its score absolutely determined that it was about to fall down in a while. And so when I looked at, the statute says to prioritize education. And as a past district employee here, we have things that support the next level of the kids with the transportation centers and some of these kitchens that were already flagging extremely high or on the flag for a Mercer. It doesn't mean there'll be a new one or a renovation, but I think I want us to step into that space and go out and look at these wraparound supports that take care of the kid, not just in the classroom themselves. So if you see some transportation bus barns, if you see some kitchens in here, that was the thinking. And if anyone has a question on that, I'll stand for that. We still have, I think it's 90% of projects are education, and like 83, 84%, 85% of the money is education. So I felt that we prioritized. It wasn't 49%, it wasn't 51%. So I felt we were within that realm, and a lot of these haven't been touched in 12, 15 years.
Committee, any further questions there? Okay, seeing none.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep, Senator Office.
So I do have one more question. We, as I see it, are hitting 86.4 million of the 95 million. Nope, let's see. Is that the all-in? That is the
Yes.
all-in. Okay. So there's about 8.5 million outstanding. What is the intent there?
Mr. Chair, Senator Rothfuss, that is deliberate. If we fund someone out of the 95 million, and it turns out because the Mercers haven't been complete and final remedy and therefore final cost, and if we're off That is what it's to make up.
I see.
What I didn't want to do is get somebody on their way and then say, oops, the dollar amount is different. We will augment that through a 25, 26, you'll get somewhere down the road. So it's deliberate.
I see. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, nothing more for me on the 95 million.
Okay, so committee, before we move forward there, I'm going to make sure that everybody's questions, concerns, comments for the 95 million are answered. Senator Beitman, you all good out there?
Well, you read my mind. I have a question. I just don't know where it fits, and I've been kind of holding it. And I just figured I'd ask it now. And if it needs to wait, it can wait. But on page 8 of the bill, I know we talked about the 2.6 million for demolition at our last meeting. Can you explain that a little bit more for us and for the appropriators? What are we demolishing? And is it, obviously, is there a chance to sell the property instead of spending the money to tear down whatever building? Have you looked at selling it? Just kind of walk us through the 2.6 on the demolition, or refresh my memory on that.
Jerry,
Mr.
please.
Chair?
Yes.
And Senator, sure. So 2 things regarding the demolition, and it's tracked in the spreadsheet here, and we would be getting to it. We have a new superintendent out at Plat 1, and when we approached them to explain what we saw on the list here and the qualifications of Wheatland Junior High for demolition, he said, oh goodness, we wouldn't want that demolished. We need to use the gym. We store some things in it, in the lockers. And I explained the process to him that we would come out, we would engage in a conversation with you with a Mercer. It's a fairly large facility. You don't use 2/3 of it. If there is a way to architecturally disconnect the part that is not going to be used, it might qualify for a partial demolition. And if you want to keep that excess square foot within your footprint, and it's like LSO said earlier, they are already carrying a closed Chugwater Elementary School for about 30,000 square feet, plus this added square feet. And they would have had even more if they had not taken the other elementary school and just released it to the charter. So we're going to have a conversation with them in December before we even engage in a full Mercer and spend that money on, is this a partial demolition? Does this make sense for you? Or if not. So the number for them reflects taking the facility down, and they wanted to go on record to say we at least would like a part of the facility saved. So if that answers the senator's question. The other one is regarding Albany 1 and the old Slade Elementary. And much like when we were discussing, not here, but prior, cost benefit. And is there a cost benefit? So when we took a look with the district at Albany 1's old Slade Elementary, there was an inadequacy, which obviously is what led to the new school being built. We looked at the maintenance bills and worked with the district on what they're spending on it, utility bills and maintenance bills. We looked at it's not going to get in any better condition, and no one from the community, and we don't think it's our lane to go outside this, was asking for use of that building. So when we did that analysis and looked at the dilapidation that it's been in and where it's heading, we made the recommendation as a phase 1 to tear the building down. And phase 2 gets to the actual site, and if they were to sell it down the road, and that's a different conversation for another time. And then I would ask if that answers the senator's question.
Senator Beitman?
Yeah, for now. I'm not familiar with the building. I haven't seen it, so I don't know what kind of shape it's in. I just wanted to make sure that, if there was an option to just offload it and sell it to a willing buyer for whatever they want to use that property for, go for it. But I just want to know the backstory on that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks. To Senator Beitman's question for the Laramie building, Old Slade, we have sold a number of our previous elementary schools, and schools have been repurposed and are thriving in the community. This is not one of those buildings. It's not going to go down that path. It's just not a building that you fix up and save for the community, unfortunately. It's certainly something that I did discuss with the school district, and we looked into it. I appreciate the director's cooperation in all of that to try and assess, well, what would it cost to keep this useful? And it just didn't look good, unfortunately.
Don't you agree? Right? No, don't even have to ask that. Okay. Okay. All right. Jerry, I apologize to the committee and everybody else. I'm just making sure that everything on my side of here looks good. And I'm trying to scribble down some notes at the same time as listening to you. So I'm trying to do this. But on page 42 of our educational conditions, I show Jessup is a 0.349 as I look at this, and Buffalo Ridge, and the only reason I'm looking at these is just because they're flagged on your sheet. Buffalo Ridge is a 0.357. And then on 37A, through your sheet, I've got to get myself back to that sheet now. I show Buffalo Ridge is at a 0.349, and I just want to make sure that we've got my information correct here, that we have the right schools, but I think I've got that mixed up. No, I think everything looks like it's right. I think I'm all good. So, yes, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Vincent, if I go back to that demolition, I guess kind of question I have as we look at the amount of money for those demolition projects, would it be fair of my assumption that these buildings are of the age where there is a fair amount of abatement that would be required in the building materials driving the cost of that demolition up, or is it just the size of the footprint of the building that does that?
Mr. Chair and
Please.
Representative Larson, you're fair in that assessment. Anything that is mid-century built, which we call from 1950 to 1980, before any of the early 80s on asbestos laws were changed and everything, we are going to find a lot of items in that building that are hot and need to be remediated. Yeah.
Okay. All right, committee, I think all my questions here and my notes, I have got notes beyond belief here. So, Jerry, I think we're good to move on after the 95. So I think what we will do here, we got about 10 minutes. So my question to you is, do you want to dive in and start that process, or would it be best to go ahead and start this after lunch on fresh?
Mr. Chair, if you could adjourn for lunch, I think that would be good. I want to be able to take the bill and the spreadsheets and what we have coming up with our other sheets on education, non-education, and lay them out in a way that I can be ready for any question that comes at me. So if you would adjourn, I will stay here.
Okay.
Fine.
All right, committee. So that puts us, we're about 10 minutes early on adjournment for lunch. Have it till 1:30. I think that's probably good for everybody still. So we'll be back at 1:30 and we'll continue this discussion.